Game of Thrones, the rage of spreading flames. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want to support us and get VIP access to exclusive content, our Ko-Fi is waiting for you. Chapter 26 Arad. Leonor let out more breath, temporarily put away his disappointment, and asked a brown-haired Arad, "What news did your father ask you to bring me?" "My father said, please forgive him, he cannot repay your kindness back then." "Oh, is there any?" Leonor looked slightly. Davos was an honest man. His son brought him with a suggestive word, without mentioning anything about the situation. He seemed to be either concerned about Stan. Nice, either I don't know what it is. In short, this matter has nothing to do with Stannis. Stannis, hearing Leonor's words, a lad looked up slightly, glanced at the black-haired and blue-eyed prince, and lowered his head slightly restrainedly. "No, no more, it's really gone." Leonor asked, "My father asked me to find a way to follow his highness and learn something." Arad lowered his head. "What will you do?" Leonor tilted his head. This Arad didn't tell the truth. He was like his father, a person who is not very good at lying. "I can do things that a knight can do." Arad was full of confidence. "Oh, then are you a knight now?" Leonor was interested. What would a knight do? If he followed the real requirements, there would be more people, such as horse riding, archery, gun art, poetry, sword art, and platoon arrangements and so on. Counting the time, Davos has been promoted to knight for more than 10 years. Is his son so outstanding? No. Arad's momentum suddenly leaked and became a little disappointed. "Your father hasn't enthroned you." Leonor was a little surprised. Knights can be enthroned. It is understandable that Davos cherishes his reputation and does not enthrone others. If his son is excellent enough, why not enthrone his son himself? "No, my father said that his enthronement means nothing to me." Arad was helpless. "Your father is right, he doesn't mean anything to your enthronement." Leonor smiled. Davos was an honest man. He sent his son to his side to make a move. I think he was afraid that he would be too. "If you think you can use his son in some places, you might as well try to believe him." Leonor thought of Davos's character and paused slightly. Without waiting for Arad to speak, he said to him, "Since that's the case, you can be my follower first." "Yes, sir." Seeing that Leonor agreed to take him in, Arad quickly lowered his head and prepared to kneel down to thank him, but he did not want to be held by his arms. "Don't kneel down. This kind of thanks is not popular here. If you want to thank me, then complete the order I gave you." Leonor grabbed Arad's arms with both hands and stopped him from kneeling. "Present. I will definitely do it." Arad quickly stroked his chest with his hand. "Okay." Leonor patted Arad on the shoulder and did not continue to say more. Bringing the newly acquired Arad shoes, Leonor and Renly entered Redford and met with other members of the Imperial meeting, including Balliston, Varys and Pycho. Renly is different from Leonor. He often came to Junlan City in recent years. He was familiar with the other members of the Imperial meeting. After a few words, he suddenly said, "Where's Lord Baratheon? Why didn't you see him this time?" As soon as Renly finished speaking, the air inside the Prime Minister's tower suddenly fell silent. Balliston opened his mouth. Varys and Pycho looked at each other, and they didn't say anything, or they couldn't find anything to say. "Renly, maybe you are not leaving the God's Gate, so you didn't find that Lord Barry." His head was being stuck there, the old god. Leonor explained with a smile to Renly. "What?" Renly's expression changed suddenly. "Yes, you heard it right, his head is on it," Leonor explained to Renly in a sure tone. "Why is this happening?" "Robert." Renly subconsciously thought that he had done it before leaving King's Landing. As for the reason, pet heir Baratheon kept boasting everywhere that he had taken the virginity of the two sisters Tory sisters. It may be that it angered Robert, making him want to avenge his dead adoptive father. "No, I did it," Leonor corrected Renly's wrong guess. Renly didn't say anything, but looked at Leonor with a surprised look. "As the Minister of Finance, this person has put the state's treasury in debt and has tried to throw the problem to me. I can only let him clearly understand his mistakes," Leonor explained in an inadvertent tone. "Then he probably can't recognize his mistake." Renly twitched a corner of his mouth. Robert was not at home, and Leonor actually cut off his Chancellor of the Finance Minister. What did he think? Yes. After all, my head is on the top of the city. I'm definitely not just killing him, there are other questions. In short, this person is not a good person. He committed treason. If you don't believe it, you can ask Bali. Stan, Leonor said as he threw the topic to the leader of the Imperial Guard. There is no doubt that Bellis, no, that little finger, his huge property must be inseparable from the huge losses in the state's treasury. Balliston did not give up Leonor's face. It was really Petter. Berish is not a top noble like Lannister. No one believes that his huge amount of property was not corruption or bribery. Huge amount of property. Renly became more and more confused. You should know that Xiaphon is a person promoted by the dead old John. Now that old John is dead, he has no background, so he will be killed if he kills it, but this is traitorous and it is huge property and also involves huge losses in the state treasury. What is the situation, Mr. Renly? Please listen to us. Seeing that Renly was puzzled, Varys stepped forward with his hands and explained to the Duke when he learned that the total amount of property that was copied from Balixi was over 1 million golden dragons. Renly was also shocked. He was not a person without family background, but he left the land, mines and real estate. The total amount of money is only 100,000 golden dragons, and the money and real estate are inherited from the Baratheon family in all generations. It is really exaggerating to have so much money like Berish. This Barry must have been treason. After knowing Xiaoi's property total, Renly made the same conclusion as Leonor. I won't talk about this matter. We have reached an agreement. It would be great if you can see this way. Now the position of Chancellor of the Exchequer is vacant. When Robert comes back, I can recommend you. Leonor saw that Renly didn't have any. He was very satisfied with the objection. With Renly's support, Robert would be able to deal with it. No. Renly quickly refused when he heard what Leonor said. I don't know how to manage finances. If you want, you can be the Chancellor of the Finance Department and hand over the legal affairs to me. Just kidding. The National Vault is now a big hole, and Renly doesn't want to take on the hot potato. You know the law. Leonor couldn't help but be curious when he saw that Renly was unwilling. No, but I will judge. Renly shook her head directly. Legal affairs, this thing is still blank in Westeros. The title of Judge of Legal Affairs in the Imperial meeting is nice, but in fact it is not about writing, publicizing and preaching the law, but the one who is responsible for the judgment of the king, as long as he can cut people with a knife. Chapter 27 Bread price rises. Leonor was speechless by Renly's words. Knowing to judge. After thinking for a while, he felt that he was not a legal talent, and it didn't matter if he gave up such a name, so he turned his attention to the three of Balliston's. Three sirs, what do you think? I have no objection. Balliston shook his head directly, while Varys and Pycelle next to him quickly followed, saying that they had no objection. Then let's decide this. Let's talk together when Robert comes back. Seeing that everyone had no objection, Leonor immediately decided on the matter. After determining Renly's position in the Imperial meeting and completing the comfort of the Stormland, the Imperial meeting officially entered the discussion stage, and Leonor and everyone entered the seats of the President's table to sit. According to Leonor's prior request, Balliston and others formulated the problems they encountered as questions and then discussed them in different topics. The first speaker was Varys. Your Highness, King's Landing has a huge problem now, and the most urgent problem is waiting to be dealt with. Whether it is Master Page or Sir Balliston, they all think this problem is the biggest, so let's discuss it first. The fat on Rhys's face was glossy and his expression was tense. Tell me the matter directly. Leonor waved to ask Dora to get some clean water for himself to moisten his throat. The price of bread in King's Landing has increased. Varys said a serious sentence. How much has it increased? Why has the price increased? Leonor sat up straight, and the price of food increased, which is really not a trivial matter. The residents of Junland City generally use bread as their staple food, including black bread made of oats and wheat bran, and white bread made of fine flour. These breads are not expensive individually, but everyone cannot do without this thing, a bread. If the price increases by 1 copper, then the 500,000 people will be 500,000 copper coins, which can be piled up into a mountain. There is a bronze star because most of the mills in King's Landing have been shut down and the supply of flour is insufficient. Varys did his homework. Why did the mills stop work? Leonor was a little surprised. The capital garrison sealed the place, and most of the entire King's Mill belonged to Petter. Mr. Balliston, immediately let your trustworthy men unblock the mill and restore the mill's work. Leonor immediately asked Balliston, Yes, without any hesitation, Balliston directly found a loyal guard and asked him to find someone to pass the order. Even if the mill is unsealed, the grain merchants are unwilling to sell their grains now. They planned to raise the price. Varys's oily face became nervous. He was afraid of Leonor. What rough approach to solve this dilemma. A group of profiteers who took advantage of the situation killed them and hung their bodies on tree branches. A fierce thought flashed in his mind, and Leonor immediately suppressed his crazy idea. The reason he killed Xiaoyi was because this guy's biggest backer, John Allen, was dead. He was confident that he could make up for the power vacuum after the other party disappeared and maintain the situation of the imperial meeting again. However, the merchants in King's Landing City were different, especially grain merchants. Food is a necessity for life. The grain merchants in Genland City all have complex interests behind them. Behind them are the princes of Huan and Hejian. They are all rich and soldiers, not as good as those of Littlefinger Goods. The saying chaotic as a ladder sounds very impressive, but in essence, it is that it is not strong enough, no soldiers or generals, and can only rely on catching up on the waters. By the same token, Leonor does not have enough strength to kill all the merchants, nor does he have the ability to maintain the social situation that has lost them, so he can no longer think about killing them directly. He must use roundabout methods to make them willing to sell their food. What do they ask? Leonor tried to ask SHH. Varys felt relieved when he heard Leonor not directly shouting for fighting and killing, and at the same time sighed. Thanks to the seven gods, this prince is not only good at fighting and killing, make money. Varys expressed the needs of the merchants. How much do they want to make? Do you want me to open the national treasury for them? Leonor asked sarcastically. That's how merchants are. Varys sighed. The nobles were always full of contempt for groups outside of them. When merchants were not satisfied, how to deal with these guys was also a headache. The conference table fell silent for a moment. Dorat brought the water cup for Leano. Renly next to him listened carefully to the whole process. Seeing that Leano got the water cup and refused to drink it, he leaned slightly towards him and the others on the table. Do you want to hear my advice? Leonor looked up at Renly and suddenly remembered that his brother had a friend from the Tyrell family. As the monarch of the Riverland, if he could handle this guy, at least he would do it. More than half of the businessmen speak. Let me talk to those businessmen. How about it? Renly recommended himself. Yes, I agree. Leano immediately gave support, and raised his head, looked at the others in the imperial meeting to ask for their opinions. Agree. Balliston immediately agreed. Agree. Varys nodded. Agree. Pachel also voted for approval. Then I'll leave this matter to you. Leano toasted the water cup to Renly and then drank it. Please leave it to me with confidence. Renly raised her chest and looked confident. Seeing that Renly looked confident, Leano couldn't help but be curious. However, the imperial meeting was still in progress, so he couldn't ask questions, so he could only continue to discuss other issues in King's Landing with everyone. The food price storm caused by killing Petter is the most important thing in Genland City at the moment. Compared with this matter, there are disputes in other aristocratic territories, where the nobles sell slaves, etc. are all small things. After completing the imperial meeting, Leonor wanted to go to Renly to ask, but unfortunately the brother left the Red Fort directly, making him lose his life, and he could only take Arad back to his residence in depression. On the way back, Leonor asked Arad about his second brother Stannis' current movements on Dragonstone Island. His Highness Stannis has been fascinated by a god recently. A god? Leonor stumbled slightly. Yes, a god called the King of Light. People also call him the Heart of the Sacred Flame or the God of Shadow and Fire. But here we are more called Red God. Arad popularized Leonor. I know, I have heard of him. He is the god popular in Mill. Leonor nodded and responded. If he remembered correctly, this person was also the only god who had shown miracles in the original work. By the way, Stannis does have a relationship with this god, and is even recognized as the savior by a priestess of the Red God. No, not only Mill, he is also respected elsewhere in Essos, but this is not as good as Esha. Arad's tone became erratic, making Leonor's thoughts unable to help but follow him. His words, through the vast land, headed to the Shadowland southeast of Essos, where there was a town full of magic. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28: The Beginning of a Knight. Before becoming a knight, Davos Shiwas was a smuggler on the narrow sea. His ships had been to many places, including the trading city-state of Essos, the ice and snow outside the Great Wall of the North. As Davos' second son, Aurad also ran with his father in many places. He had heard many legends, including the eternal decision of the Red God and the Cold God, and the legendary Azer Ahai, who was destined to save the world. And the old gods who stare at the world through the tree of heart. The description of the world in Arad's mouth is far more touching than the stories told by the clowns. It originated from the storm he experienced at sea, and the countless smuggling experiences he wandered on the line of life and death. You have a lot of experience, Arad. Are you literate? What are you good at? Leonor had some expectations for Arad. Yes, my father asked us to learn reading and writing with Lord Zillan. My swordsmanship is not very good, but I am not afraid to retreat. Arad heard Leonor's expectations, so he tried hard to express his abilities, but he always feels that his meaning is not in place. Where did you grow up? Leonor was already satisfied when he heard Arad's literacy, but his face remained silent. The flea nest in King's Landing. Arad felt a little panicked when he saw that Leonor had no expression changed. Then are you very familiar with King Landing? Leonor was surprised. The flea nest was the slum of King Landing. Davos actually came out of it. It was amazing. Of course, the children living in flea nests know every street in King's Landing. Arad nodded affirmatively. It's very good. Let me ask you again, what are your plans for the future? Leonor asked Arad's thoughts. I want to be a knight, Arad said firmly. What do you think the knight looks like? Or do you want a piece of land of your own, then marry a beautiful wife, give birth to your own children, and then let him inherit your? Leonor refused to comment. The word knight is a class in his understanding. No, the knight I think is not like this. Arad shook his head decisively and rejected Leonor's description. I don't deny that the knight I think should own a piece of its own land, which is a symbol of identity, but I also think that the achievements of the knight are more than that. Then what do you think a knight should have? Leonor raised his head slightly. This is a good seedling, and the world in his heart has not yet been finalized. A knight should have. I don't know either. Arad expressed his confusion about the knight's way. I understand. Let's do it. You should act as my follower first and follow Dorot's guards. Leonor made arrangements for Arad. Yes, my lord. Arad didn't know what the black-haired and blue-eyed prince understood, but he obeyed all the arrangements of the boss. Next, let's talk about Zillan. Speaking of which, the last time I saw this child, she was only so older. Leonor finished the interview arrangement for Arad and asked about his niece's situation after Robert occupied the Iron Throne. He strongly approached another Florent family who claimed to have ownership of the River Bay in revenge for the Tyrion family's siege. He asked his younger brother Stannis to marry Flor. Saras from the Lund family also found a lover of the Florent family named Dillana. Tang and Yuo, under Liano, once fell in love with Dillana's maid. Not to mention the past, Stannis and Cialis gave birth to a daughter named Zillan, who was a very cute girl, but Leonor had never seen each other several times. Sir Zillan is very good. She is with a patched face every day. Is the clown my father Duke Stevens planned to bring back from the trading city-state? Leonor was a little surprised. After his father was in the sea, the ship that rushed to rescue brought back a letter and a clown. The clown was later taken away by Stannis. Yes, Arad stopped talking. What's wrong with Shillan? Leonor realized what Arad wanted to say. Mr. Shillan was confirmed by Bachelor Kristen a few months ago and had grayscale disease. Grayscale disease. Leonor's face changed. Westeros medical skills are not primitive, at least not as popular as in the Middle Ages, but there are only a few medicines that can cure diseases and save people, but strange diseases are endless, and grayscale disease is a contagious and severe illness. The body of the patient will become distorted, the skin will become hardened and turn into rock-like gray. At first, it will only be partial, and when it spreads throughout the body, it will completely petrify and die. Yes, Lord Zillan survived very strongly and lived happily. Arad's tone was a little sad. Happy, a child destined to die. Leonor felt some pity for his niece who had never met several times and directly interrupted Arad's words. I'll write a note now, and you'll get it to Pachel. He was talking about Zillan just now, and now he was about to write another letter to Pachel. Arad, who was interrupted, was a little surprised, but Leonor's next words made him unable to help but look surprised. Let Master Sir check the classics. I remember that grayscale disease can be cured. Really? Arad couldn't believe why Bachelor Kristen hadn't said this before. Of course, I don't remember which book it is, but I'm sure that as long as it is a disease, it will definitely be cured. If Pissel cannot find it, I will go to the school town to check it out in person. Leonor vaguely remembered in the TV series, the dog-licking dog seems to be a grayscale patient. That guy found a way to cure himself, and there was no reason Zilin couldn't do it. As long as it is a disease, it will definitely be cured. Arad was stunned by Leonor's words. He used to be sad that Lord Zilin was infected with the grayscale disease at such a young age, but he never thought about this. Of course, don't talk nonsense. The disease can be cured, but if it is delayed for a long time, it may not be cured, Leonor said as he speeded up, and Arad quickly trotted and followed him. After returning to his residence, Leonor found a paper and pen to write a note, and asked Arad to send someone to Pachel. It was not that he did not trust Arad, but that this guy didn't know the road in Red Fort, so he asked him to. I'm afraid I can't even find where Pissel lives. After Leonor found someone to give the note, he temporarily arranged Arad to do its command, asking him to teach Arad how to obey orders. An excellent night should start with a soldier. Chapter 29, Battle to Defend Food Prices. Everything in King's Landing City is going on as usual. No matter whether it is the price increase of bread or the princess disease, it cannot stop everything from going on. Renly and his knight Loras held a private banquet, invited the major grain merchants in King's Landing to attend, and made a public speech at the banquet, conveying the idea of hoping that everyone would give them face. However, no one paid attention to him. Even the grain merchants who belonged to the Tyrier family in Huendi were just looking at it. Most of the merchants ignored Renly's rhetoric and indirectly expressed their unwillingness to give up their interests. The next day, the grain in Genlan City began to tighten, and the price of bread began to double. The rise in bread prices caused a commotion throughout the city, and the imperial meeting had to be held. Sir Renly, you didn't go to those grain merchants? Poliston was confused and asked Renly about his achievements as soon as possible. Renly's face looked ugly. He was already full of confidence in the banquet for the merchants, but now he realized that he had been completely fooled. This matter is not the focus now. Those businessmen ignore the security of the country and ask for money at will. We must give a countermeasure. Leonor gave Renly a cover, and Renly was also trying hard, but the effect was not ideal. Forget it. How should we deal with it now? Varys asked. How much grain is there in Red Fort? Leonor asked a question. There are some, but more of the wine needed for the banquet. Varys did not understand Leonor's question very much, but he still gave the answer, which was not accurate. What he had was information about personnel, not this. A trivial matter. Where's the food stored in Fanxi Castle? Leonor asked Renly. Fanxi Castle stores the food needed for a winter year, Renly answered. Dorite, send guards back to the summer hall, and let someone transport the food we stored to Fanxi Fort, and at the same time send people to Huendi and Dort to buy food storage. Leonor turned to Dorite and issued a statement to Dorite. With an order, while he stroked his chest and left, he turned his head to Renly and said, Fanxi Fortress will transport the existing stored food to Hong Fort. After he finished speaking, he turned his face to everyone in front of him. Since those merchants want to make money, I will make them lose their pants. Varys, you send out the news and submit to the imperial meeting and take the initiative to lower the food prices. That is, those who have made contributions to the country, I will do it to them. Reward, if confronted by the imperial meeting, Leonor did not continue to say anything and silently conveyed the outcome of fighting against the merchants, but this made Varys relieve the breath that was hanging in his heart and answered yes. Are you having any difficulties? Leonor made arrangements on his own, and suddenly remembered that not all of them were his subordinates, especially Renly. Although he was a brother, Fanxi Castle belonged to his territory. Will it be unhappy for him to cross him to mobilize food? Renly was stunned by her brother who decisively made many orders. She came to her senses and asked him if there was any difficulty, and quickly shook her head. My brother, I support you at any time, Renly replied, wondering what Leonor could do. But as long as he could take revenge on those businessmen who dared to ignore him with Renly's strong support, things went smoothly. After Leonor finished the arrangement of the imperial meeting, he made another arrangement, asked Arad to find connections, and established several strongholds in the flea nest, preparing for the use to sell food. Yes, Leonor is ready to fight a battle with merchants to defend food prices. When Varys released the news as he asked, the grain prices in King's Landing fell into a one-day stagnation, but in the following time, all grain shops began to stop selling grain, and grain merchants and local merchants began to hoard the market, and the price of grain began an uncontrollable increase. The price of 1 bushel of oats, 25 kg, rose to the outrageous price of 20 silver deer in just 2 days. The soaring grain prices forced Leonor to order the opening of the barns in the Red Fort and start selling grain at low prices in flea nests. However, there is not much grain stored in the Red Fort, and it is really a drop in the bucket to save the huge grain market. Almost only at the same time when Hong Bao was selling grain, major grain merchants also sold grain, but their grain prices soared again during this period, and the price of 1 bushel of oats jumped to 26 silver deer. Faced with the soaring grain prices, several violent incidents occurred in Junlin City in just one day. The grains of Fengxi Castle arrived in Junlin City one after another. Every time they were sold, they were stolen, which could not stabilize the grain prices at all. At the table of the former president of the Imperial Congress in the Red Fort, sweat beads were oozing from Varys' bald head. He conveyed the latest news collected by Ziobi to the others in the meeting. There were many stored foods delivered by Fengxi Fort when it was sold. The grain was bought by the grain traders. While the grain traders were rushing to buy Fengxi Forts to store grain, they also transported a large amount of grain from Hejian and Huan lands. They were stocking up a large amount of grain. If they were asked to buy the current price, they would. If Junlin City sells the hoarded food, then everyone in Junlin City will go bankrupt. Sir, we have to talk to those merchants, Varys advised Leonor. Where are you? Leonor turned his eyes to the others. I will never compromise with those businessmen. Renly maintained a firm stance and must not sit idly by and watch those businessmen gain power. The Baratheon family must not admit defeat to them. Balliston and Pychel were silent. The 5 of us. Now Renly is the same attitude as me. Lord Balliston and Master Pychel remain neutral. Leonor looked at Varys. But sir, if this continues, the entire King's Landing City will go bankrupt. Varys requested that the people in King's Landing City are no longer happy now, and many people have been squeezed out and even have to buy food according to daily needs. No, Leonor comforted Varys. The current situation was probably within his expectations. Seeing Leonor's unhappy look, Varys didn't know whether it was the noble's inherent arrogance or whether he was really confident. And he had nothing to say for a moment. Just look. Leonor had a little bit of affection for Varys. This bald eunuch was not just a person who played with power, but at least he had certain considerations about the overall situation. Based on this alone, his situation was in Balliston and Pychel. Leonor had expected the soaring grain prices. If the soaring grain prices will inevitably lead to speculation and refusal, this is his opportunity. He deliberately transported the food of Fengxi Castle at a slow speed, and without any restrictions on selling, letting those grain merchants intercept and purchase, thus regaining some of the funds when the grain price rose from 1 bushel to a sky-high price of 50 silver deer. And major grain merchants hoarded tens of thousands of bushels of grain. He began to increase the grain transportation capacity of Fengxi Bao, and a large amount of grain poured into the market, causing the grain price to fall. The price was reduced to 20 silver deer per bushel, and then 10 silver deer and 5 silver deer when the major grain merchants found that the grain they had stocked could not be sold. It was too late. At this time, at Leonor's request, Golden Rooster began to find grain merchants one by one according to the clues provided by the little birds. Forced purchase of the food they stockpiled at a low price. In just a few days, all the grain merchants in Junlin City went bankrupt. The grain market in Junlin City returned to stability, and 70,000 bushels of stored grain were stocked in the barn of Red Fort. Leonor won a battle to defend food prices with his insight beyond this era, and Robert, who was heading north, also returned after he had accumulated the granary of King's Landing. Chapter 30. Robert returns. In the early morning, all the main roads in the city of King Landing that went straight to Red Fort from the Gate of the Gods were cleared, and all the people were persuaded to leave, leaving only the empty streets, waiting for the return of the king, who was leaving outside the Gate of the Gods. Leonor's black hair was neatly combed, wearing a black robe embroidered with silver patterns, holding a heart tree scepter inlaid with rubies, waiting for the king's scepter with Balliston, Pychel and others. Leonor was a little impatient, so before Robert's convoy returned, he asked Dorit to bring some chairs, prepare clear water to wait on the roadside, and invite Balliston and Pychel to sit together. Have you heard of it? Renly walked away for a while drinking water, then came to Leonor and asked him, what? Leonor didn't know what news Renly received. Joffrey, I heard that Robert wants to marry Sansa of Duke Stark. Renly spoke in a voice that only Leonor could hear. The incest evil seed, if he was asked to marry Stark, if he could marry him, the daughter of the K family, the position of the North may be shaken. Isn't this normal? Sit down. Leonor patted Renly with his hand. telling him not to be surprised that Joffrey's life experience has not been made public yet, and this attitude is not suitable for showing in front of outsiders. I want me to tell you that Sansa is a famous little beauty. Renly's eyes turned and sat next to Leonor and started talking. Oh, Leonor responded calmly, but our Joffrey, the future crown prince, is not very good. I heard that on his way back this time, he had a conflict with Arya, the youngest daughter of the Duke of Stark, and was taken down by the other party. Renly revealed a shortcoming in a teasing tone. Just kids are just fighting. Leonor remained calm. He remembered this incident. Part of the reason why Joffrey insisted on executing Ed Stark alone was because of this incident. Who would have thought that a child's dispute would cause the execution of the Duke of the North to be killed? It can only be said that things in the world are impermanent. I mean, as our brother's child, Joffrey's performance is really bad. Renly deliberately increased his voice, which attracted the attention of the guards and nobles around him, making them whisper. Leonor heard Renly's intentionally increased the volume and turned his head to look at the younger brother, with a very serious expression. What's wrong? Renly felt a little uncomfortable when Leonor saw it. It's just a dispute between children. Don't say it anymore. Leonor asked Renly to shut up. Joffrey's life experience is indeed a powerful tool for them, but this powerful tool is not used like this. Renly was bored now, and she pissed her mouth and didn't say anything, so she could only sit there honestly. When the sun rose to midair, several golden robes passed in the distance. A long line came from afar. The knights in gold robes were guarding a car dragged by 8 horses and wrapped in silk. The carriage is coming. Seeing the king's car returning, Leonor immediately brought the scepter, stood up with Balliston, Pasir and others, and went forward to greet him. The long team was approaching in a blink of an eye. At the forefront of this team was a handsome knight riding a white horse and wearing a white horse, with brilliant blonde hair and an arrogant face. He was the Imperial Iron led by Barristan, a member of the guard, the younger brother of current Queen Cersei Lannister, and the real father of Crown Prince Joffrey. Behind James Lannister, next to the huge carriage, a tall black horse with a long-faced man with a big wolf-skinned body was sitting on the verge of a man with thick cheeks and gray eyes, carrying a great sword that is so big that it requires both hands to hold. Although Ed Stark, although his face has become much more vicissitudes after many years, his style remains the same. Beside him, there's a girl riding a pony. She is wearing a jacket and trousers, the iconic long face with the Stark family, with brown hair tied to the top of the head, without any fatigue or dust on the face of traveling far away, but was full of youthful and lively interest in everything. I think it was Ed's young girl Arya she Tucker. When the long line reached King's Landing City, the huge 8-carriage stopped. The curtain of the carriage could not wait to be opened. First, a belly came out of it like a beer barrel, with a dense beard hanging around her waist. The king of a sword was Robert, followed by the beautiful but mean Queen Cersei in a golden robe, and the blonde boy Joffrey wearing a crown. Seeing Robert showing his face, Leonor couldn't look at the other people in the team, holding a scepter, and taking Balliston and others to pay their respects. Leonor, you did a good thing for me. Robert got out of the car and expressed his dissatisfaction as soon as he got out of the car. Your Majesty, I don't understand what you mean. Leonor pretended to be stupid. Petter, he was promoted by John Ellen, do you know? That woman wrote me a letter saying that you should pay your life. Robert's expression was very angry. Who? Leonor knew that Robert was talking about killing Xiofen, but suddenly a woman popped up. Who is it? Lesha Tully Ellen, my wife's sister. Duke Ellen's wife, Ed Stark, carrying a big sword, came to Leonor and looked at the black-haired blue-haired man. The prince with his scepter said, hiss, I forgot that my little finger has no background, but his mistress, Lisa Tully. Leonor heard Ed mention it now and thought about it. Lisa Tully, the mistress who missed the little finger, was a crazy woman, and a crazy woman who is crazy about a little finger. It was through her that the finger poisoned old John to death. Even the person next to the pillow can be poisoned to death. How would such a crazy woman deal with herself? Promote yourself or let the faceless person assassinate him? As the widow of John Elin, she will definitely be enemies but not friends in the future. Hello, Lord Ed. Leonor realized the situation in his heart and thought about the future, while still politely saying hello to Ed Stark. Your Highness, even if Petter takes money that shouldn't have, you're doing it too roughly, Ed said to Leonor earnestly. Even if Littlefinger should be killed, he shouldn't be so casual. The man has been killed, and I can't perform miracles like the Virgin Mary now. Leonor stopped pondering the situation and expressed his helplessness to Ed slightly. My wife has now rushed to Eagle Nest City. I hope to reconcile for you. If necessary, I hope you can make some public apology at that time, Ed discussed with Leonor in a gentle tone. His wife Caitlin Tully and Lisa Tully are sisters. They grew up with Littlefinger, who was fostered in the Flow City since childhood, and they have some love. Okay. No problem. Leonor agreed with a smile. If he lost some face and could gain the obedience of the princes of the Eastern Realm, then he didn't care. Game of Thrones only has trade-offs, no gains and losses. Chapter 31 Salt Tax and Food. When Robert saw Leonor agreeing to Ed's words, his expression relaxed a little, but he still didn't look good, and scolded him again. Look at the good things you do. Yes, my majesty, I have you, and your king's hand have bothered me. Leonor beat Robert. If you want to thank your king, prepare a martial arts competition for your king. Seeing Leonor surrender, Robert also made a request. The competition is great, Leonor responded. I want to give the first place in the competition 50,000 golden dragon as a reward. Robert continued to ask, a generous king, there are too many 50,000 golden dragons. Leonor rolled his eyes. Peter never said something like you. Robert was unhappy. Yes. He didn't spend your money for you. Have you ever thought about whether you are carrying the debt of 8 million golden dragons now? Those creditors will come to you for any time. Leonor explained to Robert that he explained to Robert. Pros and cons. This time Robert did not speak, but instead a mean voice came from beside him, holding the Queen of Joffrey, Cersei. She sneered and attracted everyone's gaze, and then spoke slowly. Mr. Petyr never lets debt disturb his king, his queen. It is better for the Lannister family to forgive their debts from King's Landing and to fund the martial arts competition of His Majesty the King. How about it? After all, the Lannister family brings gold. Leonor also sneered at the same slightest harsh retort. The Lannister family is also one of the creditors of King's Landing. Why? Cersei's face turned gloomy. Aren't you our queen? Not your wife of His Majesty the King? If you can't make these masters, why bother saying such unpleasant words? You seem to have no education and you want to teach our future crown prince. Leonor turned his eyes toward him. Joffrey, who was held in Cersei, smiled slightly at him, which made Joffrey pull his hand out of his mother's hand calmly. What do you mean? Cersei was so angry that her body trembled, and she didn't feel her son's movements. Enough. Seeing Leonor quarreling with Cersei in public, Robert felt his scalp explode and shouted in time, Sorry, my majesty. Leonor stopped provoking in time and apologized. As a minister, you must handle financial matters in time. I will talk to you another day. Robert glared at Cersei fiercely, threw a sentence to Leonor, and then held the long sword at his waist and left. Ed also followed in time. Leonor waited for Robert to leave, giving Cersei a provocative look, and then turned around and left with a scepter, regardless of her reaction. As for the situation where Renly and others looked at the scene, they stopped in place. Don't know where to go. The celebration ceremony that was supposed to be lively was dissatisfied by a quarrel, but this effectively stopped Robert's idea of holding a competition. Leonor left everything aside and returned to Red Fort to continue his financial affairs. Littlefinger used to have two financial measures for King's Landing. They were crazy about the happy service industry and used women's bodies to make money. The other was to borrow money for Robert and to borrow money from the families of Lannister, Iron Gold Couplet and Tyrael. While borrowing money frantically to maintain his expenses, he also earned a lot of money and occupied a large number of production materials such as salt farms, mines, mills, etc. Now that the finances have been transferred, he naturally cannot do it like Xiao. He has made a plan for the country's taxation and is ready to replan the financial resources. The main source of wealth in Genlin City is taxation, which is also the head tax and commercial tax for residents in Genlin City, and the other is the tax collected from the princes of the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros. In a high position, Leonor decided to recollect taxes beyond these two taxes, and his targets were salt and iron. The Targaryen dynasty had only commercial taxes on the salt and iron industries, and did not have special control measures, which made many people not aware of the profits of salt and iron, and also gave him a lot of room for operation. When he was young, Leonor had already seen the profits of iron, and even reviewed the theory of salt and iron in his memory in the Han Dynasty. He wanted to take advantage of these two benefits very early, but unfortunately he had no suitable iron ore in salt ore as capital. It is easy to imitate the gameplay without capital, so he does not do anything randomly this time. Leonor collected a lot of salt farms from Petyr's property, and it occupied most of the salt sources around Genlin City, which can be regarded as the largest salt capital. The salt tax that Leonor intends to collect starts here. He first sent people to major salt farms and spent a lot of money to restore the production of those salt farms. Then he asked Renly to issue a law to prohibit the sale of private salt and salt fish, and let the national salt farms. The salt becomes the only legal salt with the iron fist of the specialist. Tens of thousands of pounds of salt were sold out in just half a month. The net profit of the manpower and transportation costs was enough to be tens of thousands of golden dragons at this sales speed. The national treasury can earn a salt tax of 20,000 golden dragons every month, and 240,000 golden dragons in a year, which is 2 to 3 times higher than the taxes paid by the past 7 kingdoms. With such profits, Leonor also let go of the competition that Robert had been longing for, and after he pushed the first prize to 20,000 golden dragons, and extorted several iron ores from the kings, he agreed to let Robert a martial arts competition to welcome the prime minister was held just as Pishal used ravens to participate in the competition. Leonor began to use his own iron ore to plan the iron tax compared with the salt tax classified into the state's vault. Leonor intends to directly classify the iron tax as himself, because it concerns the development of forging technology and the quality of military armor, and cannot be allowed to handle it by others in order to facilitate one's own business. It is not appropriate to be a single-minded franchise. Therefore, he plans to go hand in hand with private business to control iron prices and collect taxes, and use private business to promote technological development. That's right, that's it. Leonor wrote the last word with a quill pen, nodded with satisfaction, and turned his head, and saw Dorrit standing beside him, looking at him. "What's wrong?" Leonor asked his guard captain, as he seemed to have something to say. "Sir, the registration for the martial arts competition will be over until tomorrow," Dorrit said. "So what's wrong?" Leonor lacks interest in fighting and killing. For the army, courage is not the most important thing. What the army needs is cooperation, military expenditure and technology. We have a lot of brothers who want to participate. Dorrit was careful. "Yes. Sign up for the competition in your personal name. Those who can get the first place will be rewarded with 50 households. Those who are the second place will be rewarded with 50 households. Those who are the second place will be rewarded with 50 households. Those who are the third place will be rewarded with 50 households." Leonor smiled. He agreed and gave a reward. He ruled centralized power, so he did not interfere. However, in order to win over his subordinates, he adopted a system of food seal and distributed fiefs to his subordinates according to the cap tax. The fief is calculated according to the counting tax of the family of 3, each with 2 silver deer. 1 household is 6 silver deer. 50 households have fiefs equivalent to 300 silver deer. Knights with 50 households can get from him every year. "I will receive 300 silver deer here, and I will take it for a lifetime until I die of old age, but it is not allowed to be licensed and cannot be hereditary. The harvest of the territory depends on the knights themselves, and the fief is available when distributed and will never fluctuate. Therefore, everyone is very happy to accept this system." The soldiers in the Midsummer Hall also default to having fiefs as a symbol of becoming a knight. "Yes, my lord." Dorrit was very happy to see Leonor agreeing and gave a reward. "If there are many people who sign up, we will conduct an internal selection to allow outstanding people to participate." Leonor did not forget to remind him that there are many soldiers under his command who want to become a knight. Chapter 32 Intelligence. Before heading to the Summer Hall, Leonor recruited 2,000 soldiers in King's Landing with the opportunity to be promoted to knight and the treatment of the 2 golden dragon settlement fee. He was originally preparing to take advantage of the opportunity of war in the frontier to give these soldiers the opportunity to be promoted to knights and build his own noble group. Unfortunately, the cover of the Iron Throne was too strong, which led to Don and the Huon area not daring to invade him at all. There is no war in the Midsummer Hall. Although he did not encounter war, he still held competitions such as archery, running, horse riding, stone throwing, and cultural learning. He commanded several of the first contests, promoted them to knights, and rewarded 30 to 10 households with food. There are different quotations. In 4 years, no more than 30 people were promoted to fief knights among the 2,000 people, and the total number of fiefs rewarded was no more than 300 households. However, even so, it was enough for the remaining 2,000 people to follow them wholeheartedly. After all, he has food and drink with him, and he can really become a knight. Although there are not many opportunities, he really has it. The soldiers of the number 2,000 are waiting for promotion and wealth. If they hear that they can get the first place in the martial arts competition to welcome the prime minister, They can't squeeze out the registration points for the competition. Leonor let his men go to the competition and predicted the situation in advance. After asking Dora to make preparations, he sent him off, and asked the guards to call his breast brother Vincent. How about what you asked you to do? Leonor secretly told Vincent before coming to King's Landing, asking him to gather people in King's Landing, to inquire about information from all aspects, and to build his own intelligence system. Vincent is the illegitimate son of Leonor's nurse, Mrs. Mikola. Now that he grows up, he has black hair and gray eyes. He doesn't look outstanding, but his temperament is calm. He responds respectfully after hearing this, "Sir, we have recruited some people and now we have heard some news. For example, our Prime Minister. We have been in the city in the past few days to inquire about old John's life. Where has he tracked down?" Leonor raised his eyebrows slightly, and it seemed that Ed Stark was also suspicious of the death of Duke John, his adoptive father and brother-in-law. As a native of the North, he has no acquaintance in King's Landing City, so he can't find out the situation. Vincent's tone was filled with regret. "Then can you find it?" Leonor smiled. He heard the pride in the tone of the breast brother, and it was obvious that he had some clues. "I bribed a scribe under Pacier and found out that the old Prime Minister had been reading a book during his lifetime, and Pacier had been looking at books about poison for a while. It seems that our Master Pychel also knows some situations. He was the Grand Secretary of King's Landing during the reign of Aerys II. The Lannister army was able to enter King's Landing before my brother, so I want to come and go with him. It's inseparable from relationships." The Baratheon family launched a rebellion, and Robert led the army to win 3 times a day in the frontier. He was beaten by Landeo Tally and Sinshooten so that he could not find the north. He fled north to Mingzhong town and got Stark. Reinforcements with the Aelin family finally hammered Rhaega Targaryen to death on the banks of the Trident River before turning defeat into victory before the anti-King army entered King's Landing City. The Lannister army in Caen City in the west took the lead in breaking into King's Landing City. The Mad King Aerys II was also killed by James Lannister, who was then the royal guard, but the western border was under pressure. The army did not successfully occupy King's Landing City, but just grabbed a vote here and ran away. "Yes, I just don't know why His Majesty the King still tolerate this cunning guy staying by his side." Vincent expressed his confusion. "This is not very normal. My brother would not care about these issues." In order not to waste his energy, he continued the general personnel and policies of Aerys II. Leonor spread his hands directly. Why did Robert spread his hands? He is so generous, but he doesn't want to waste his time. This is not cautious. Vincent shook his head and rejected this approach. "You have too high demands on him." Leonor complained about Robert's character without any guilt. "Sir, what do you want to do next? Do you need me to find the cause of old John's death?" Vincent did not answer Leonor's words, but asked his request respectfully. "Don't be so old-fashioned, Vincent." Leonor couldn't help but tease him when he saw Vincent's old-fashioned look. "Then let me tease the king like that?" "I can't do it." Vincent's mouth twitched. "That's really hard for you. I have 3 things to do next." Leonor's expression became serious, and he said 3 things in Vincent's serious expression. "The first thing is that you need to investigate the situation of the capital garrison, especially the information of the commander of the capital garrison. The second thing is that you supervise the daily life of Queen Cersei Lannister, and it is best to find out who are her lovers." 3 things: find opportunities, control Cersei's mistresses, and get evidence of her having sex with her lover. "Yes, I've already recorded it," Vincent said after hearing 3 things. He focused his attention. "Then you leave first. Remember, be careful and don't take any risks." "Yes, my sir." After a few words, Vincent left, and Leonor sat alone in the hall, preparing to handle financial affairs documents. A guard came to report that Renly was here. "What's wrong with this?" Leonor packed the documents and clapped his hands to the living room. Renly walked towards him alone in a gorgeous robe, with a gloomy feeling on his face. "What's wrong?" Leonor looked at his younger brother, feeling something was wrong. "Brother," Renly shouted, walking steadily towards the black-haired and blue-eyed man. Renly never called herself like this. Leonor looked at the Renly coming. His expression changed slightly, and his instincts retreated backward. Seeing his actions like this, the expression of Renly coming from the opposite side also changed, and his body rushed forward, and at the same time, there is an extra dagger in his hand. "Come on. Come on." Leonor subconsciously screamed in his throat when he turned around and ran towards the inner room, and at the same time he had thoughts to sense his scepter in the room. The red scepter placed on the table was pulled by Leonor's invisible thoughts and automatically floated up and flew out of the house. Renly saw Leonor turn around and run away without saying anything, and his body was bullied like a ghost. And his short sword in his hand pierced directly into his back, a pain in his heart, and the aura of death caused Leonor's pupils to shake violently. But fortunately the scepter flying out of the house also fell into his hands in time after receiving the red scepter. Leonor, under the pressure of death, turned around and slapped the tip of the ruby on the killer's face that was almost exactly the same as Renly. Slapping his skin off, his body twirled and fell to the ground after panting and patting the killer. He did not feel any relief, but instead tightened his nerves even more. He quickly stepped forward, waved his arms without thinking, and bang a few times. The short scepter was treated as a mace, lifted it as they rose and fell. The killer on the ground was blossoming directly. It was not until the red and white flowed all over the ground that the guards guarding around arrived late. Chapter 33 Assassination. After hearing the news, Dort and Vincent, who had just left, rushed back. As soon as they entered the hall, they saw many guards standing at a loss. In the middle of the hall, Leonor was standing there with a breath, holding a red scepter dripping blood in his hand. An assassin's body was lying at his feet. The red and white turbid liquid flowed on the floor, next to the assassin's corpse with a flowering head, the human skin face that was violently beaten down, and the bridge of the facial features and nose slowly disappeared, and in the end only a half-soft human skin mask was left. Sir, Dort and Vincent were shocked, and they all walked around the assassin's body and came to Leonor. Leonor has the Tao Sutra, which is not mainly about practicing martial arts. Now he is suddenly attacked, and he is inevitably a little shocked. When he uses his scepter to fuck the assassin, he can't help but feel a little disappointed. Now he is breathing. He came to breathe evenly, ignoring Dort and Vincent, but walked to the assassin and picked up the soft human skin mask. The facial features on the soft human skin mask have all disappeared, just like the faceless male face of Chihiro, with an extremely soft touch. Leonor pinched the mask, then pulled the assassin with the end of the scepter, looked at his face, and saw that the face had been broken by himself with his scepter, but from the remaining forehead, chin, completely different from Renly's face, faceless. Leonor picked up the mask in his hand and made a judgment in his heart. This is the Faceless, an assassin organization from Bravos, a trading city-state of the continental. This is the assassin organization is said to have been established during the ancient Valyrian kingdom, and believes in a god called the God of Thousand Faces to assassinate people in a way that they accept commissions. It seems that Lisa Tully has made her choice. Leonor didn't need to spend any effort to think about who the person who bribed the faceless man assassinated him. Now the only person who has made enemies with him and has the ability to do so is the mad woman left. Sir, Vincent couldn't help calling again when he saw Leonor holding a scepter and holding a mask in silence. I understand. This assassin comes in disguised as my brother. It has nothing to do with you. From now on, we will improve the guards around me, and arrange all my diet and special guards to be responsible for all my food. The activity route will be arranged in advance every day, and then for me. Report. Leonor asked Vincent to improve his protection. Yes, Vincent nodded with Dort. In addition, find me another sword. Leonor touched his clothes. There was a black gold vest he made himself into his clothes, and it was because of this thing that he could bear it. The faceless person was safe and sound in one blow, but he could not guarantee that the faceless person could still use this thing to block the next assassination. He must improve his melee ability. He originally wanted to find a swordsman to improve his melee ability. He had swung his sword with Berliston before, but the military formation sword technique used by the knight was not suitable for him. He paused slightly, remembering the sword skills that Arya practiced in the TV series, which was very suitable for him. I remember there was a sword technique in Essos called Dance of Water. Find me an expert in this field. Leonor changed his words and asked, yes, didn't Renly come to me? Leonor asked again, causing the two close servants to look at each other, not knowing how to answer. Just as Dort and Vincent were silent, a guard came in from outside, glanced at the scene in surprise, and it took him a long time to come to his senses to report, Your Highness, Duke Renly is here. Put off these and take Renly to the garden in the courtyard, and I'll find him. Leonor waved his hand and threw the scepter in his hand to Arad in the crowd. Wipe it clean. As Arad bowed, Leonor walked out the door with great strides. His face recovered from the wind and calmness, and he no longer saw the panic and madness of being assassinated just now. Leonor came all the way to the garden of Red Castle and saw Renly here. He was wearing a green embroidered gold robe, which was very coquettish. When he saw him, he took the initiative to greet him. Leonor, Do you know what our Prime Minister is doing these days? Renly took the initiative to meet Leonor and called him his name. What are you doing? Leonor saw Renly's name and felt a strange aura on his body, and he felt a little relieved. This is true, he is chasing the cause of John Elling's death. Have you found it? Leonor made a surprised expression, as if he had never known about it. No, but I decided to help him. Renly showed a bad smile on her face. Then do you have any relevant clues? Leonor blinked. No, but clues can be created. I know that old John had a servant named Chuangfu during his lifetime. This man did not follow Lisa Tully back to the valley and was promoted to knight after old John's death. Renly smiled and said his thoughts. Who gave him promotion? Leonor raised his eyebrows slightly. Renly wanted to use Ed Stark as a gun envoy. Our brother, he should have enthroned the knight because of the old John. We can give some guidance to Duke Ed to pay attention to the new knight, and then let him pay attention to this Sir Scholar's unusual. I have a better way. Do you want to listen? Leonor raised his eyebrows slightly. I'm listening. Find a chance to let that cultivator die? It's best to let his death be related to Lannister. Leonor couldn't help but smile. Cultivator has no problem, but this way of dying it can make people feel that he has a problem, and it can make Stark suspect Lannister. One deepen the contradiction between the two. Leonor, you are more sinister than me, Renly complained, but a smile appeared on her face. No, this is called fun. Our Duke Ed is too boring in King's Landing. Let his life be richer. This is also effective for our goals. Renly's expression became serious. Okay, don't say some words directly, it's boring to say them. Leonor glanced around and saw that there were still other people in the garden of Red Castle, and those words were not suitable for saying them here now. Leonor and Renly have reached a basic agreement, which is to overthrow the Lannister family by Cucky's cuckold Robert. Renly's goal is to help the Tyrell family, replacing Cersei Lannister with Margaery Tyrell to gain greater power, and even before the new crown prince appeared, he was not meaningless to the Iron Throne. Leonor knew Renly's idea very well and didn't care much about it. His goal is not conflicting with his brother at present, so he can still cooperate. As for the future, let's talk about it later. Chapter 34 Catelyn Tully. Preparations for the Prime Minister's battle for Dahan are underway. Leonor was assassinated, which improved his guard's strength and strengthened the guard's specifications. Even the food were specially designed to be tested to avoid being traded. People poisoned. Assassination is different from war. War has rules to follow, while assassination does not have any at all, and only depends on the killer's personal will. Leonor is a life-loving person. After watching the Game of Thrones TV series, his biggest impression was that in addition to playing Game of Thrones, he had to be as decisive as Cersei, and he had to be as obedient as Jon Snow. Ed Stark, who regards honor as his life, was cut by Joffrey, and Jon Snow was a night watchman on the Great Wall. When Robert Stark, who was invincible in all battles, died in the Bloody Wedding, Jon Snow was a night watchman on the Great Wall. When Emperor Kiao, who loves people as much as his son, died at the Purple Wedding, Jon Snow was still working as a night watchman on the Great Wall. Finally, when the dragon mom Daenerys Targaryen returned and almost unified the entire Westeros, he was stabbed to death by the resurrected Jon Snow. What does all this mean? The winner of the game is not the one who performs the most eye-catching, but the one who lives to the end in order to improve his survivability. Leonor specially invited a water dance master to help him prepare to improve his closeness. However, the new swordsman did not arrive, but a message came first. He was sent to Mrs. Catelyn from Eagle Nest City in the East Valley. Has arrived in King's Landing City because Leonor forcibly killed Petyr Baelish. His mistress Lisa Tully went crazy, and Ed Stark, the Duke of Winterfell, as the king's hand, will intend to make a statement for the two families, and so he sent his wife, Lesha Tully's sister Catelyn Tully, to Eagle Nest City as a lobbyist. Now that Mrs. Catelyn has come from the east to King's Landing, the beautiful and dignified lady with brown hair and blue eyes brings back bad news. My sister. She claims that she refuses to accept any compromise in any situation except to let you pay your life. Robert sat on the black throne surrounded by countless sharp swords and received a reply from Lisa Tully. His face was so angry that he could not do anything to Lisa Tully, so he could only look at Leonor. Once again incompetent and furious, look at what you did. Leonor raised his eyebrows slightly and said nothing in the face of the king's angry accusations. In this case, it is unnecessary to say anything, Your Majesty. We should think of some countermeasures to solve this problem. Piglet stepped forward slightly and used suggestions. Can I hand over my brother's life? Robert immediately glared at the old scholar, and his angrily voice shocked everyone present to speak. Pedder's huge wealth is unknown. He is suspected of embezzling the country's wealth. I think he is guilty. There is no problem with Leonor's handling. Renly stood up and supported Leonor. Then what should I do? Take action against a widow with a child? Robert turned to Renly to question. Leonor was his blood brother, and John Ellen was also his adoptive father. Being able to take the throne is entirely the other party's efforts to support him. Are you going to bully his widow now? My brother, Madame Lessa should have been the wife of Duke Elin. Why did she go crazy for Barish now? This is an infidelity to the old Duke. We should issue the orders of the king to the East Valley to demand the nobles see the situation clearly and hand her over. Renly talked directly, and he had a way to deal with this matter long ago. Lysa Tully went crazy, but the nobles in the East were not crazy, and they dared not challenge the Iron Throne. No, you can't do this, it's unfair to Lysa. Catelyn, as Lysa's sister, felt very angry when she saw her sister being targeted like this, but this emotion was quickly soothed. Renly had already thought about the draft and spoke when Catelyn had angered. Don't worry, Mrs. Catelyn, we won't make things difficult for your sister. She can save her life, but she must be imprisoned. This imprisonment address can be winterful, but only if you can take care of her. Hearing Renly's words, Catelyn settled down and looked back at her tall husband Ed Stark. Seeing him nodding to him gently, she softened her momentum and nodded silently, as if she agreed to Renly's words. Do as my brother said, release the crow and tell all the nobles in the East that if they want to be safe and sound, they will hand over the crazy woman intact. Ned, find someone to look for her. If she goes crazy again, I swear, we must let the army traverse the eastern border. Robert said the following words to Ed Stark, and then he ignored the Tits brothers leaning over and was ready to leave directly. Wait, Robert, there is one more thing. Ed looked at the king who was about to leave and quickly called him, Little Robert. What should I do with John's son? The Little Robert mentioned by Ed refers to the son of John Ellen and Lessa Tully, the future heir of the East Valley, a child who is less than 10 years old, because of the relationship between John and Robert. Okay. So he named the child in the name of the king. If the mother who lost her guardian was the one who would definitely not be able to govern the East, send him to Dragonstone Island first and hand it over to Stannis. This is John's plan during his lifetime. Robert had to stop and patiently give a plan. He planned to follow the tradition of the nobles to give the bride. The adult Little Robert finds an adoptive father, just as he and Ed were sent to Eagle Nest City to be raised by John Elin when they were young. Your Majesty, Duke Lannister once said that he wanted to adopt Robert as his adopted son. Pasil reminded Robert, my brother, I think I am qualified to raise Robert. Renly also made a request. He did not want his second brother Stannis to be able to get the support of the East so easily, and he could not allow his enemy Lannister to get involved in the East territory. According to the nobles' legal system, Robert Elin will definitely be the guardian of the East and the lord of the Eagle Nest City in the future. As long as he becomes his adoptive father, it means he will control the East and so let alone Renly. Even Catelyn also pushed her husband. Ed originally thought that it was not a sign of separation from the orphan and widowed mother. After being pushed by his wife, he simply stood up. His Majesty, Robert himself wanted to leave, but only when he saw that everyone had solved the trouble of Lessa Tully. He began to compete for custody of Robert Elin again, and he couldn't help but feel like a big fight. Isn't there anyone who wants to truly bring the East realm into their own hands? He always only knows how to play the bloodline. And it is a waste of Westeros in their hands. Leonor looked at the guys who began to fight for custody, and was too disdainful to participate in the argument between them. He just stood aside silently, thinking about how to kill Lysa Tully and Robert. Little he does not oppose Renly's solution, but he does not have any better way to end the dispute openly. He does not agree with Renly's solution, because he does not have the strength to oppose. As for Lysa Tully and her evil seed, he never let the other party survive. The difference is just how to kill it. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35 Water Dancer. Robert Elin's custody is related to the camp in the East Valley. Apart from Leonor, several nobles were unwilling to give up, and King Robert, who was originally planning to adopt Stannis, fell into hesitation. Under the scramble of all parties, Robert also discovered the importance of little Elin. In silence, he gave up his plan to let Stannis adopt the little boy. Then when everyone quarreled for a long time, he looked up and said, "Pick that kid to me." Originally, Everyone was arguing that they were more suitable for adopting little Aelin than others. Suddenly, when they heard Robert's words, everyone was silent. That child is brought to me and I will adopt it. In this way, you don't have to fight. Robert looked at the silent people, snorted coldly, got up and left. There was no room for quarrel, and everyone could only disperse themselves. Leonor and Renly walked out of the king's hall with a smile on their faces. He was rarely satisfied with his reaction to his brother. Although he knew that Robert's thoughts were different from his own, it was difficult to get the wrong answers in the process and the correct answers. Aelin's custody is related to the ownership of the camp in the east. The lions in the western front are potential enemies, and it is appropriate to not let them succeed. What satisfies Leonor is that Robert did not allow Ed to adopt little Aelin. You should know that although the northern border is a poor land, the residents are brave. Moreover, the Stark family itself is in laws with the Tully family in Aegean. They adopted the Greyjoy family during the Battle of the Iron Islands a few years ago. The child, I heard that the child is the only male in the Greyjoy family today. In this case, the Stark family, together with themselves, already potentially mastered 3 of the 7 major territories in Westeros. If they get support from the Eastern Realm, they will have the ability to rebel. Liano, you didn't say anything just now. On the way between Renly and Liano, they saw the smile on their brother's face, and they were a little dissatisfied. What can I say? I don't want that little kid. Leonor rolled his eyes. Then you can recommend me and let me adopt Aelin. Renly couldn't help but say, no need. Leonor shook his head directly. He would find a way to kill the child. If the child died in Renly's hands, Renly's reputation would be really bad. Are you worried that the child will hate you? The child cannot remember things. As long as he coaxes him, the Eastern Realm will become our firm ally in the future. Renly saw some of Leonor's thoughts. I couldn't help but shake my head. All who rely on coaxing will eventually be coaxed away. Liano disdained that he wanted to kill the child, just for his own safety. As for power struggles, he did not rely on the existing system to rule Westeros. Plan. Your thoughts are too dark. Renly felt that Leonor had become unfamiliar. Is it necessary for children? My brother, you don't understand me. Leonor couldn't help but sigh in his heart when he saw Renly's disregard. Renly felt that Leonor was too dark, while Leonor felt that Renly had seen less. If he had heard stories such as the orphan of Zhao, sleeping on firewood and tasting gall, he would probably not dare to say this. Both sides had their own ideas. And left without speculation, without saying a lot, Leonor returned to his residence in Red Fort and happened to meet the master of water dancer whom Dorite invited him back. The invited water dancer master was wearing a light head, a hooked nose, wearing a dark purple top, and looked short and thin, but he stood there with a unique posture. When he saw light embroidered with silver and black robe, oh no, a ceremony that is not at all stage fright. Hello, your highness, my name is Sialio Frel. Can you introduce your resume to me? Leonor smiled and bowed. I am the chief swordsman in front of His Majesty. Bravos. Then why are you here? Leonor was a little surprised. Bravos and Pantis were both trading city-states of Essos, where Neptune was the elected lifelong ruler, and Pantis was with Pantis. The prince is the same, but unlike Prince Pantis, who are often found for reasons to sacrifice and behead him, Bravos' Aquaman still has a certain ability to protect himself. As his chief swordsman, why did he appear here? Can I not answer this question? Sialio smiled and refused to answer the question. It's my problem that offends me. Master Frel, don't you mind if I call you that, do you? Leonor waited until Sialio nodded gently before continuing. I want to learn your water dance sword art. When can you start the course? I can start anytime, but can I make a request? Sialio raised his right hand and signaled that there was a request. Speaking, I hope to bring a student to study with His Highness, because I promised his father to become her dance teacher. Sialio felt embarrassed on his face. Who is she? Leonor thought of someone. Miss Arya Stark, daughter of Duke Ed Stark. It's really her. Seeing that Leonor was Arya Stark, who was nicknamed Arya by many netizens, he couldn't help but smile. He didn't expect that he would become a fellow disciple with the other party. I have no problem. Leonor agreed to Sialio's request. Judging from his performance in the plot, Arya is not an annoying little girl, and it is good to be a fellow student with her. Your name of tolerance will fly across the narrow sea, Sialio praised. As long as I'm not laughed at, I'll say I'll learn swordsmanship with a little girl. Leonor smiled and said humorously, no, my swordsmanship will give you the ability to shut up. Sialio smiled confidently instead. How many armies can you defeat with your swordsmanship? Leonor couldn't help but tease her, causing the bald swordsman to purse her lips. Not knowing how to answer the sword dance of water is very mysterious. In fact, to put it bluntly, it is a sword technique developed based on the slender sword. It is famous for making the sword's body light and able to dance on the water surface. This kind of swordsmanship is indeed first class, but it is not a battle formation technique. Often, water dancers may not be able to break through the protection of an iron armor for 10 years, let alone fight against thousands of troops. This is the difference between one-person enemy and 10,000 people enemy, but one-person enemy also has the use of one-person enemy. After all, within 10 steps, the enemy will be full of enemies, and the enemy will be angry, and the blood will flow, even if there are thousands of troops and horses. What's the use? Leonor is flirting with him, but he is still concerned when he is studying with Sialio. He agrees with Sialio's requirement to teach Arya Stark together, and at the same time adjusts his work schedule and picks out every day 2 hours to practice the sword dance of water. Chapter 36 Dance of Water. In the afternoon, the sun shines through the courtyard, and the roses in the flower beds are in full bloom while the flowers and leaves were swaying. Leonor was wearing a simple outfit, standing on the floor in a golden rooster's independent posture, feeling the changes in the center of gravity of the body, and changing the muscles of the soles of the feet, and moving the muscles of the feet according to the method taught by Sialio in the shade of the courtyard on the other side. Sialio was fighting a girl with a gray-eyed hair and gray eyes with a wooden sword. The little girl is about 12 years old, with her gray eyes and agile expression on her face. She holds a wooden sword in both hands and slashes at Sialio in a less formal and fierce posture. He skillfully flashes by and then takes it. The wooden sword stopped his wrist and chest with his fingers, or simply blocked the sword and directly seized the opponent's weapon. Teacher, I want to learn to dance. After Arya was disarmed, she started calling out, completely different from her previous arrogant look. Dance is a solemn thing. Sialio successfully impressed the young girl of the Duke of Northland, and was very satisfied, and began to officially enter the teaching stage. Is it like him? Arya couldn't wait to imitate Leonor and pose as a golden rooster stands alone, but as soon as she stood firm, her body couldn't help but shake left and right, and could no longer maintain balance. No, Sialio looked and rolled his eyes. Then where do I need to start? Arya had to give up. Silent as a shadow, light as a feather, as fast as a snake, as steady as water, as soft as silk, as fast as rabbit, as slippery as eel, as strong as bear, as unmoving as stone. Sialio slowly recited a passage. Arya only regretted that she had fewer ears, and that sentence was too long for her. Sialio was not impatient at all, and repeated the formula again to Arya and asked, remember these sentences, then figure out what the words mean, and finally do. I'll be a dance expert, right? Arya almost jumped up excitedly. Yes, that's right. Sialio did not veer. Okay. Arya sat aside with great enthusiasm and began to keep muttering the words that Sialio taught. Leonor maintained the golden rooster's independent position, feeling the center of gravity of his body, mobilizing the muscle groups under his feet to balance his body, while watching the entire process of Sialio's teaching to Arya as Bravo's chief swordsman. This Sialio is good at teaching. Not only is he extraordinary in his sword skills, but he can teach according to his aptitude. Even when he teaches swords, he chose to use formulas to hone his perseverance and spirit in his nature for a girl like Arya, and to suppress her natural activeness and despicability, while he adopted direct training skills for adults like Leonor. Water dance has extremely heavy steps in swordsmanship, so he taught Leonor to use the unique skills of the golden rooster to balance the body with the muscles under his feet, which is to exercise the muscle groups on the soles of the feet and also exercise the body's center of gravity balance transferability. After practicing his body, he asked Leonor to find the smart Bravo's cat, and after letting it go, he asked him to catch the cat that is famous for its smartness, or stay in the empty courtyard. Squatting on the occasional landing birds, Leonor's soul has already cultivated the fire of expelling objects and is slowly entering the stage of manifestation. His physical strength is not as strong as those knights who have experienced a long battle formation, but his eyes, mind and physical strength are far beyond that, and now he has passed. After this exercise, the strength soared rapidly. It was easy to catch the clever Bravo's cat, squatted on the ground and easily attracted the birds to fall to their side, and caught them unexpectedly after exercising his body so that he could move like a rabbit. Sialio began to use a lead-filled wooden sword and taught Leonor how to use the sword technique of water dance. When the physical sensitivity is achieved, the remaining sword skills are nothing more than a combination of concepts and practice. Leonor is still making rapid progress and can fight against Sialio in just a few days. On this day, Leonor and Sialio practiced swordsmanship in the courtyard, which made Arya next to him look excited, but she was full of disappointment because she was too young and had an unstable mind. Sialio didn't let her practice at all, only let her practice independence and catching cats, and she has no way to catch the Black Bravo's cat named Balerion. Leonor and Sialio used a wooden sword filled with lead to bang for a while. When it was time to take a hand towel from the guards to wipe the sweat, they saw Arya look angry. I couldn't help but greet the Arya with a smile. Alia, HMPH, Arya turned her head away, not wanting to pay attention to this black-haired and blue-eyed guy. He was obviously in class together, and teacher Cilio was too partial. Haha. Leonor didn't care when he saw the little girl get angry, so he turned his head and said to Sialio, Mr. Frel, thank you for your teaching during this period. Your Highness, do you want to end your swordsmanship? Sialio heard what Leonor said. I will continue your teaching. Leonor shook his head directly and waved his hand. A guard immediately brought a ring-handed sword with rolled leather. I noticed that you haven't carried your own sword. This is my gift to you. I hope you can accept it. Leonor signaled to Cilio to take over the sword. Arya next to her saw the sword sent by the guards and couldn't help but touch her waist. Her small belt also had a sling-handed sword shaped like a needle and was wrapped in a leather-shaped short sword with Leonor. The ring-handed sword given to Sialio is similar in shape. The sword is called Sewing Needle, which is a gift given to her by Arya's illegitimate son, Jon Snow, but Sialio does not allow her to use this short sword now, not to mention Arya touching her sewing needle, missing her illegitimate brother who went to the Great Wall of the North to become a night watchman. Sialio took Leonor's gift and first looked at the sword. The length was his own. With the right arm, I stretched my palm into the ring handle and pulled out the slender blade. The sword blade with ice cracks was pulled out. As Sialio made a stabbing action, Yin Lang's sword body immediately arched and then collapsed again, causing the sword tip to sniff. This sword should only be comparable to Valyrian's steel sword. Cilio waved his arm, picked up the tip of the sword, and sighed as he looked at the sword body that looked like ice cracks. This sword was never felt in terms of strength and toughness, which reminded him of the legendary Valyrian steel sword. This sword is not as good as the Valyrian steel sword. Leonor shook his head and refused. This sword was an ice cracked steel sword. He used thousands of kilograms of iron. Ice cracked steel is made of cast iron clamped with cooked iron, and then quenched and annealed with pine charcoal powder and secret medicine. After repeated tempering, it is a top steel of the mortal grade, which can still exist with a magical Valyrian steel. In terms of gap, Valyrian steel is approximately comparable to Xiangang blood rebar. Your Highness, do you have the Valyrian steel sword? Is it the light sword or the dark sister? Cilio couldn't help but be surprised when he heard this. Why did he make a judgment like this? This is a comparison with the Valyrian steel sword in his hand. Is it right? Chapter 37 Storage. The Light Soul and Dark Sisters proposed by Sialio are both famous swords made of Valyrian steel. Light Soul belongs to the Lannister family, and the Dark Sisters belongs to the Targaryen family. The unified characteristics of the matter are the whereabouts of unknown origin. Losing from the last master is also the object of the yearning for countless knights and good swordsmen. If I had Light Soul, Lord Tywin's army might have entered King's Landing City directly. Leonor and Sialio teased. Lord Lannister is not such a person. He really hopes to find Guangxio. He also thought about finding a substitute for Guangxio, and even contacted many declining nobles for this, but I have never heard of him in this matter. He used his power to oppress others. Sialio defended Tywin Lannister. With Lord Tywin's character, I'm afraid I'm embarrassed to take out the sword I took through that kind of means. Leonor was just a joke, but when he saw that Sialio was taken seriously, he could only explain with a smile. Tywin is a well-known person. He knows the consequences of doing that kind of thing. Even if he buys a sword, he will lose face of the entire Lannister family. The old lion will never do this. Leonor himself was just a joke and was not willing to get involved in it, so he continued, if the sword is not used, it will be the same as scrap iron and will be corroded by rust. Valal steel won't. That kind of steel won't rust. The swordsman from Bravos had a different kind of seriousness towards the sword. Seeing this, Leonor walked around the topic again and pointed at the stinging sword in his hand. Master Sialio, you can now give this sword a name, and it belongs to you now. Just call it Flashing. Sialio raised the stinging sword in his hand, gave him a name, and accepted the sword. After naming the sword, Sialio regrouped the sword into the leather bag and put the sword directly to his waist. as if the sword should be there. Your Highness, are you missing a sword guard? Sialio, who was wearing a stinging sword on his waist, shook Leonor's chest and made a request. Are you not going to go back to Bravos? Leonor was a little surprised. He gave the sword to Sialio on a whim, but he didn't expect the other party to propose to surrender. His Majesty Antlion, whom I serve, is about to be ordered. He fired me not long ago and asked me to come to the Kingdom of Knights to find a new employer for myself. Sialio told his experience truthfully. Leonor thought slightly. Although Sialio was just a swordsman, he had excellent knowledge and enlightened thoughts. Perhaps he was a good man, but he could not just accept him casually. Then what do you want to get from me? Leonor asked. The king chooses his ministers, and the ministers chooses his kings. If there is a conflict between the goals of both parties, it is not suitable. I request to have a place by your side. I will do my best to protect your safety. As for the reward, you have given it to me. Sialio slapped the flashing sword on his waist. If I could make another request, I hope to have a house and enough money in King's Landing that I can teach my sword skills to more people. This means that it is necessary to promote the sword dance of water, which is an acceptable existence. Leonor and Sialio had been together for a while and had a good impression of him, so they agreed directly. Yes, I will fund you, but it's not now. I have a lot of things to do in King's Landing City and I need guards around me. Is it a martial arts competition that His Majesty Robert is about to hold? Sialio was confident. What do you think about this? Leonor looked a little sideways. Sialio was showing his thoughts to himself. This guy is not a simple swordsman in Bravos. Well, how can an ordinary swordsman make him? The Stark family in the north has hired as a professional teacher. His Majesty Robert is not a good king. Sialio said it very bluntly. I have a very pertinent evaluation. My evaluation is even lower than you. Leonor did not care about Sialio's guilt of offending the king, and he didn't like that brother much, but he was lucky. Duke Ed is not a good prime minister either, Sialio added. That's my dad. Arya waved her arms next to her to express her presence, expressing her unhappy with the teacher's evaluation. No, this is a fact. Arya, you have to learn to recognize that your father is a good person and a good prime minister from him are two different things. Sialio did not avoid Arya, and was very serious. Said to her. Arya thought for a moment and finally nodded pertinently. I also think he is not suitable to be prime minister, and he is not willing to be prime minister. Okay, seeing Arya's serious and filial look, Leonor couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth, and gestured to Sialio, intending to pause the conversation first. Sialio also knew that Arya was a very smart child and some words were not suitable for him to listen to, so he simply obeyed Leonor's words, turned to the little girl and said, Alia, you're off today. Why? Arya directly threw out a golden question. Mr. Sialio, you'd better continue teaching her. Leonor had a headache with a problem girl, so he didn't have to finish the course. Some words could be discussed after class, and there was no rush. As you wish. Sialio got Leonor to speak without hesitation, and immediately changed his words, as if he was already a guard who only obeyed the order of his employer. Leaving the venue to Sialio and Arya, Leonor turned around and returned to his courtyard and calculated the accounts. For a while he has now all run the salt fields left by Ziofinger, producing nearly 20,000 pounds of salt every day. These salts are transported to designated stores for sale, transformed into copper and then into pieces. The silver deer and golden dragon were eventually sent to the National Vault for storage. The salt industry's specialized policies have greatly filled the Junlin Vault. Leonor now plans to add several salt farms to the beach. He wants to increase salt tax revenue by increasing the production capacity of salt, and at the same time, the control of the iron smelting industry must also be put on the agenda. His salt industry relies on the salt field that was violently seized from Zioji, and then monopolizes with a king's power and military strength. This method does not apply to the iron smelting industry. Torbu Mott. Leonor knocked his knuckles and recited a name. This is the best blacksmith in King's Landing City. He once studied in the trading city-state Kahal, claiming to have mastered the manufacturing Verlia steel spells and techniques, but this is just a rumor, not to mention the iron smelting technology. As far as Leonor is concerned, this blacksmith with a background in Kahal is the first in the iron smelting industry in Junlincheng. If he wants to master the iron smelting industry, then it can't be avoided coercion or temptation. Chapter 38. Tobu Mott. Ding ding dang dang. The hammer fell regularly on the burning iron bars, slowly knocking it into shape, shaping it into the vague shape of a sword. My Your Highness, I feel honored to have your arrival. Can you tell me what you need? Tobu Mott, who was wearing a leather apron around his waist and a thin chin, looked at his black short dress with pants with flattering eyes. Leano, I need you. Leonor looked at the apprentice who was wielding an iron hammer. He was a boy who was 13 or 14 years old. He had long hair and blue of his own color. Although his eyes were not old, his muscles had just begun to show their size, and his face mold was vaguely similar to his own, which reminded him of a person. The blacksmith with sparse stubble saw Leonor staring at his apprentice gently and saying strange words to him, and he couldn't help but show a strange expression. He had always heard that the nobles were about the same sex, especially the same sex. The boy has a special affection. Don't have this expression. I'm not that kind of person. Leonor turned his head, saw through the blacksmith's inner shock at first glance, and explained what he had just said. I believe in you. Tobu Mott nodded with affirmative expression. What does your belief have to do with me? Leonor rolled his eyes, pondered for a moment, and instead of continuing to entangle, he asked a question. I heard you would make Valyrian steel. You know, I have been to the city of mages, lived there for a long time, and I spent tears and sweat, and finally learned a lot of iron smelting skills. The city of mages, the nickname of Kohal, is famous for its popularity of divination and blood magic, as the Asian Xia in the East Kokhar was one of the colonies of the city-state of Valyria in ancient times. After the destruction of ancient Valyria, he gained independence. Now he believes in many gods, mainly one of which is called Black Goat. Lord, who believes that the head-covered sacrifice of the Black Goat will use cows, horses, and even newborn babies to sacrifice to the gods. Tobu Mott prepared a big speech, ready to talk, but Leonor was not pleasant to hear the stories in the book. Answer my question positively. Leonor just wanted to know what the spell was in Tobu Mott's mouth. Your Highness, you should be a little patient. I paid a lot in coal, so I learned a lot there, including the spells and methods of making Valyrian steel. Tobu Mott also had some habits of the nobles. Understand, but I admit, I have not successfully tested the authenticity of those spells so far. Turn everyone out. Leonor gave the order, and Dora next to him waved his hand, and immediately guards rushed in. The influx of guards with swords in Eredivisie made Tobu Mott's expression a little uneasy. When the apprentice who had made the blacksmith and the others were driven out by the guards, Dorat finally left and brought the door. At once, only Liano and Tobu Mott remained in the shop. Liano turned his attention to the blacksmith. Your Highness, you can't do this. Tobu Mott was alone, with surprise and struggle on his face. His skills can be regarded as a scorpion cake in Westeros, the only one, but in the face of such irrationality as a nobleman, the class really has no way to use it, and it will be beheaded. Tell me. Liano only gave one sentence. He asked Tobu Mott to make the condition, so that people would not feel that Liano bullied the weak with his strongest nobleman. Facing Leonor's oppression, Tobu Mott was forced to have no choice but to tell the method and spell of Valyrian steel. It was an unverified ritual. It required the use of living people as sacrifices, and combined with that spell to smell iron, which could turn ordinary steel into Valyrian steel. I asked you to make the conditions, not to let you explain it directly. Leonor was amused and laughed by the blacksmith's straightforwardness, but he also felt that the noble name was sometimes useful, so he thought for a while and said, from today, your blacksmith shop will provide the kingdom with 5,000 pounds of iron ore every month. At the same time, everyone will start working to create armor sheets for me, and the drawings of the armor sheets will be sent to you. Sir, you can't do this, Tobu Mott cried soon and forced himself to hand over the iron smelting method of Valyrian steel. Isn't it enough? This is a business. How much does it cost? You can make a quotation later. Leonor did not make things difficult for Tobu Mott, but threw him an order, one that would make him rich. Orders. Tobu Mott was so surprised that he couldn't come back to his senses. Do you think I will rely on your account? Liano asked angrily. He was not that bad. No. Tobu Mott quickly rejected. There is a saying that I want to say in front. You must first make a suitable sample. If the thing you create is unqualified, then I will not let you make this order. Liano asked Tobu Mott. No, I have been studying in Kohal for many years. Tobu Mott immediately rejected. He may not be as good as Liano in status, but he does not believe that there are things in this world that he cannot create. Then let me see your skills. By the way, in order to make you concentrate on preparation, don't open your store. Leonor's words made Tobu Mott's face bitter again, just as Leonor made a request to Tobu Mott and slowly took his blacksmith's shop for himself. A noise suddenly came from outside the door. Tobumot couldn't help but turn around when he heard this. Looking out of the house, "Your Highness, Duke Ed is here." Dorrit's voice came from outside the door. "Let him in," Leonor ordered, lifted the ban outside, and said to the hesitant Tobumot, "You can try to tell Ed Stark what I did to you. He is a fair person who will stand up for you." The words of the clouds and the wind slide made the blacksmith tighten his scalp and quickly shook his head and smiled. "Your Highness, no, no." With a smile on his face, the blacksmith cursed in his heart, "The king eats the table and the prime minister shits. These nobles are all the same. Stark in the north is a barbarian and aristocrat, and they are all the guys who should eat shit, haha." Leonor replied with an indifferent chuckle, and not to mention the blacksmith's inner curse. The guards outside the house lifted the ban, and Duke Ed, who had a long face, walked in strode. He looked at Leonor, who was alone with the blacksmith in the house, with a puzzled expression on his face. "Your Highness, why are you here, Mr. Stark?" "I have a deal to do with Mr. Mott," Leonor explained. "You must have the beautiful qualities that a noble should have." Ed looked at the blacksmith boss with a grievance and warned Leonor, "Yes, my brother." Leonor didn't care, and even raised his voice and called him brother, which made Ed show a restrained and confused expression, and he didn't know how to respond for a while. Chapter 39 Valyria Dagger. When he was a teenager, Ed was sent to the East Eagle Nest City by his father, Duke Rickard Stark, as an adopted son. He was raised by the late old Prime Minister John Elan, two of them. It is considered a brother who has been a charity, so Leonor has the title of brother. Logically speaking, if it were usual, Ed would definitely not accept such a title. After all, in the education he received, there is a difference between the monarch and the subject. As the royal family, Leonor has a respectable status. Even his colleagues should be called Your Highness. It's a strange feeling to be called brother by such a noble person, and it seems proud and intimate. "My brother, what's wrong with you coming here today?" Leonor asked Ed's purpose, but he remembered the blacksmith elementary apprentice I just saw. Has the Prime Minister finally found the clue? Leonor thought Ed found the clue that Robert was wearing a hat according to the plot, but he did not expect Ed, who was opposite, to take out a dagger with a bone-like handle from under his robe. "I want to ask Master Mo, where is this dagger?" Ed pulled out a dagger with a bone-like handle in his hand, revealing the arc-shaped blade that was dark but wrapped around his eyes. Thobumo, whose face was full of grievances but his heart kept twisting, looked up and saw the blade of the dagger in Ed's hand, and his eyes couldn't move away. Verily a steel. Leonor also recognized what Ed had in his hand, and at the same time he roughly remembered that he had already slaughtered Xiaoyi. What, by the way, Xiaoyi must have assassinated Xiaoyi before his death? Bran's killer sent out. Yes, it must be like this. Ed is looking for the owner of this dagger, which means that the situation in the north is still happening as usual. Bran still fell off his leg, and he was still maintaining his Green Prophet's destiny. Is this Valyrian steel? Ed showed a surprised expression. Isn't your ice the Valyrian steel sword? Don't you recognize it? Leonor couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth when he saw Ed's confused expression. The Stark family didn't seem to use their brains very much. No wonder I see this dagger very familiar. Ed looked down at the dagger in his hand when he heard Leonor's words, showing an expression of sudden enlightenment. Mr. Ed, where did your dagger come from? Tobumot stepped forward to ask. His tone was a little excited, and he wanted to bring the dagger to come. All the equipment made of Valyrian steel, it is priceless, especially weapons made of Valyrian steel, which are basically priceless. As the #1 person in power in the West, Tywin, is difficult to get a Valyrian steel sword. This is exactly the question I want to ask you, Ed asked Tobumot. He was here today because he was interested in Tobumot's blacksmith's craftsmanship and wanted to ask him about this dagger. Who is the master? Valyrian steel is a treasure. Many families with such swords are secretly kept in touch. How could he know? Leonor sneered directly. Who said it? Tobumot was not convinced by Leonor's words. Then, who do you think this dagger belongs to? Leonor looked at the blacksmith with his eyes squinted. I don't know, but I can guess who his master is. Probably. Who? Leonor looked at him, and he felt a little expectant in his heart. Tobumot said a name that was related to Lannister. Lannister must be a member of the Lannister family. Tobumot fulfilled Leonor's wish. Although he did not specify a specific object, he limited the scope to the Lannister family in the West. Very good. Leonor immediately felt sure when he saw Tobumot say Lannister, but turned his head and saw Ed's confusion and thinking expression, and felt that this was too obvious, so he pondered for a moment and shook his head with a smile. You are so stupid. Who doesn't know that Duke Tywin has always wanted to find Guangxiao again, or find a replacement for Guangxiao? If they get such a Valyrian steel dagger, would they take it out directly? Yes. If Lannister really had this dagger, how could they take it out? The meaning of a sword lies in combat. If you don't fight, what's the meaning? Tobun Mott shook his head directly. That's a sword, this is a dagger. This dagger is used for assassination. Who would use a weapon that might reveal his identity in the assassination? Leonor corrected Tobun Mott's words, and Ed Stark could not help but raise his head and showed a sudden expression. No assassin would use a weapon that might reveal his identity, but if the assassin had planned to use obvious evidence to guide others not to doubt himself, Tobun Mott fell into downtime. Forget it, I won't discuss it with you. Master Mo, remember what I told you? Seeing that the discussion was almost the same, Leonor directly grabbed the topic, threw a sentence and left. Leonor walked out of the blacksmith shop and wanted to go directly on the horse, but turned around and saw the black-haired and blue-eyed apprentice standing on the street and playing with the two children. He couldn't help but move and wanted to walk up and go. He said a few words, but he was afraid that those who were interested would see the situation, so he took back his steps and waved to someone to take the horse and rolled it onto the horse. Let's go. Go back to Red Fort. Leonor greeted him, directly urged the reins and drove the horse away. Dorrit and other guards also rode their horses to follow him. The teams riding horses directly on the street attracted countless people to look at each other at the edge of the stable. The black-haired and blue-eyed apprentice followed the crowd and watched the riding team. The children playing next to him could not help but smile. Gandly, do you want to be a knight, too? I'm just a blacksmith. Gendry withdrew his gaze and spoke honestly. You have such a strong strength, you must be able to do it, do you know? Anne's father on the street has become a knight. The child who lacked a tooth showed his longing gaze. How did it do it? Gendry showed an unexpected expression. Can ordinary people become knights? I heard that he defected to a great nobleman, followed the great nobleman to the south, and received a reward. He came back a few days ago, and he was carrying his sword and armor. I heard that he was going to participate in the king's martial arts competition. The child said, what you hear? What a great noble. Gendry was slightly moved. If he could become a knight, it would be much better than being a blacksmith. I don't know. I just know that he is a very large noble, and he seems to be a prince. Fake it. Gendry felt that things were not very real. It's true. I also looked at his sword and armor, seeing that his companion didn't believe his words. The child quickly proved himself with his own experience. We also have swords and armor here. Gendry laughed. He saw a lot of swords and armor at Master Mo. Chapter 40 Martial Arts Competition. The horses' hooves trampled on the ground one after another, and the majestic warhorse moved forward. The warrior on the horse's back was wearing hard armor and clamped a huge wooden gun under his armpit. The tip of the gun pointed at the opponent's body, and followed as the charge was getting closer and closer, and the body was slightly lowered with a click. As the wood chips flew up, two huge night guns broke, and two war horses passed by. A knight threw the broken gun in his hand off the horse, reached out and lifted up the protective armor of the barrel-shaped helmet. A rough face full of beard reveals Greg Cregan, a family that raises dogs for the Lannister family in Caen City, Western region. People call this Cregan knight another name, Demon Mountain. The Demon Mountain sat high on the war horse, holding its head up and tugging at the reins lightly. Behind him, the opponent's war horse slowly stopped. The knight slid down from the horse's back, facing the sky, and rolled up a deformed guard in front of his chest. The throat, the iron plate of the throat protection was penetrated by the broken tip of the knight's gun, and blood was coming out from the wound of the throat pierced by the wooden jab in the stands. The crowd burst into commotion and shouted, both surprised by the bloody scene and cheered for the fierce night gunfight. It's very smooth. Leonor patted his thighs with his hand, and said to Renly beside him with a curl of his mouth, it's just some luck. Renly covered her forehead with her hand and looked reserved but proud. The person who died at the Demon Mountain in the field was named Shuff, from the East Valley, and was the servant of John Elin, who had just been promoted to the knight. Leonor looked at the dead Shufu in the field and then looked at Ed, who was sitting next to his brother Robert. Sure enough, he saw confusion and suspicion in the face of this Duke Stark. He got up and squandered his strength to find out the cultivator, but he was killed in front of him, and died at the hands of Lannister's vassal. When do you think they can fight? Renly asked in a low voice, referring to the Lannister family and the Stark family. You are so proud, my brother. Leonor reminded Renly to pay attention to the occasion and not to talk about important matters in such a crowded place, as it is easy to be heard. You have many subordinates who participated in this competition, but there was not one of them in the gun competition. Renly curled her lips and mentioned another thing. Leonor's Midsummer Hall selected a group of soldiers to participate in this competition. But there was no one who entered the gun competition. This bloody competition has no meaning at all. Leonor expressed his thoughts. His soldiers are all from practicing swords, formations and bows and arrows. They occasionally have equestrians and driving. However, they have to compete with those knights who have practiced fighting for more than 10 years in equestrians and guns. It is just a waste of their lives. Therefore, it is prohibited to participate in the competition. Soldiers cannot grow without being baptized by blood. Renly felt that Leonor was too naive and it was unrealistic to win without bleeding. Let him. Leonor still felt that gunfighting was a private fight, and soldiers should quit private fights and public fights. The martial arts competition is still going on. After several days of fierce competition, the archery competition, group battles and swordsmanship have successively won the championship among the 3 competitions he participated in. Leonor's subordinates selected from the Midsummer Hall only performed well in team battles and directly won the championship. As for the archery competition and swordsmanship competition, he directly won nothing, although he gained very little. Leonor was still satisfied overall, because most of his soldiers were from down and out nobles and civilians. Why did he compare how many years of hard training to the hard accumulation of others over the past 10 years or even several generations? Leonor was very satisfied with the current results. He fulfilled his promise to the players who won the team battle championship and the 3rd place in archery, and granted full amount to the corresponding fiefs, and promoted the positions of the people participating in the competition to encourage them to do so. Keep trying to spread the good experience of group combat in addition to digesting his experience in his own internal organization. The most important gunfighting competition in the martial arts competition also decided on the final 4. The gunfighting competition is valued for its involvement in the competition's equestrian, gun technique, physical fitness, and mental qualities. People can say that group battles are not honorable, archers are not honored, and swordsmen rely on external objects. But they cannot say that there is something wrong with a charged knight wearing heavy armor and galloping horses. Therefore, the gunfighting competition is regarded as the most important final. The champion is also regarded as the champion of the competition and has the power to offer flowers to select a queen of love and beauty. After fierce competition, Greg O'Curgan, the vassal of the Lannister family in the west, James Lannister, the regicide of the Royal Guard, and the 3rd son of the Tyrion family in the River Bay, Loras Tyrion and Sandor Clegane of the West became the semi-finals. I'm sure to win, my brother. If I were you, I could throw a bet on Lolas now, so I would definitely make a big profit. Renly looked proud to Leonor with a look of honor. Suggestion, my brother, you have to see clearly. Leonor picked his eyelids. He saw that Renly was proud of his little lover. The other 3 people in the semi-finals are Lannister. Leonor's words made Renly's originally happy expression collapse, but he quickly held on. This is a gunfight, a glorious duel, and the number of people is meaningless. Even if Loras wins, he can't give you his flowers. Enough. Renly broke the defense directly. Who asked you to provoke me first? Leonor curled the corner of his mouth. I'm a suggestion. Renly tried to find a solution for herself. I'm just reminding you some facts. 2. Leonor showed an indifferent expression. Leonor is fighting with Renly, and the game is in full swing. Loras Tyrion defeated Demon Mountain with a Merin heat, while Sandor Clegane defeated directly head-on after the regicide James Lannister. The brave fight of the 4 made everyone on the field intoxicated and cheered. In the final 4, everyone showed their style in the duel, and as Leonor watched, he gradually improved the gunfighting game. Leonor himself has always scoffed at the battlefield generals, and always felt that this kind of personal fight was a private fight. However, as he was on the audience stage, he saw that he was obviously just 4 human-shaped cans running against each other and had no highlights. Countless onlookers cheered, and hundreds of people were in their moods one after another. Suppose this is a battlefield, and 4 iron cans, including Demon Mountain, are enemies, and hundreds of spectators are their own soldiers. Even if they have 100 ways to command hundreds of people to defeat the 4 iron cans, Leonor is expected to end. The one who lost must be himself, because the audience of hundreds of people had no morale at all. The 4 iron cans, including Demon Mountain, look bulky, but as long as they charge, even 100 times more enemies will be dispersed and driven away. Faced with a feeling of oppression from the horses, those who can turn around and run have good psychological qualities. Most people may have weak legs and cannot run even if they run. Liano for a moment understood the powerlessness of the Song and Ming dynasties in ancient China, facing the northern nomadic peoples. Chapter 41 Demon Mountain. After watching a match between the strongest knights in the world, Liano suddenly realized that his idea of farming in the past was very naive. It's not that Leonor did not use the existing knights as imaginary enemies to train the army. He designed the way to deal with the phalanx and chariot formations for the heavy armored cavalry, and focused on training the various methods of the troops, paying great attention to discipline. Achievement, but everything is still theoretical. Just as Renly said, his soldiers have not shed blood so far. If they really go to the battlefield like this and meet a team led by a guy like Demon Mountain, it is hard to predict whether they can survive several rounds of charges. Leonor was conceiving various ways, and suddenly a warhorse neighed in his ears, followed by a roar of people. Before he could look up, he saw Renly jumping up next to him. What's going on? Leonor didn't bother to press Renly, and looked at the field with his eyes. He saw that the black horse riding by Demon Mountain had already had 2 pieces of corpse, while Demon Mountain, who was wielding a blood-splashing sword, was killing it. After riding his own mount, he headed straight for Loras riding. No, with Renly's scream, the adult wide sword swung heavily, and the head of the horse riding Lola's was directly cut off. The neighing sound of the horse stopped abruptly, and the unexpectedly abrupt Loras was overturned. When he came to his senses and raised his head, he saw that the big sword dripping with blood had already chopped over. Clang! 2 big swords intersected in the air, making a dull and crisp sound. A rough man with a half-faced face seemed to melt and held a slash of Demon Mountain with his sword. A dull roar came from his throat, and Moshin saw clearly the man who stopped him, and his expression became even more angry. Sander Krigan, the second son of the Krigan family who blocked the Demon Mountains, was also his younger brother. Because of his cruel and indifferent execution of the master's orders without any condition, he was given the nickname Hunterdog. Demon Mountain became particularly angry when facing the blockade of his younger brother Hunter. The sword in his hand swung and fell, and cut out 3 swords in succession. The sword held by the hunting dog steadily took it. Clang clang clang. The giant swords crossed the sparks, and the hunting dog's face, which was half burned, became gloomy, and his head almost subconsciously wanted to shift backwards to avoid the tiny Martian particles. Enough. A slightly hoarse roar spread throughout the field, suppressing the gathered guards and stopping the gloom on the hunting dog's face. The burned hunting dog heard the scolding sound and subconsciously took a step back, almost avoiding his brother's sword blade, and then bowed down in the direction where the scolding sound came. The person who stopped him was sitting in the center of the stands. King Robert Baratheon. Demon Mountain cut the sky with a sword, looked at his younger brother who was kneeling down, and then looked at the fat king on the stage, throwing the giant sword in his hand to the ground, with anger on his face. He looked down on his younger brother's obedience, but he had to surrender. Following the power of the fat king, a regular, Leonor saw that the situation on the court had basically settled and jumped out at the right time. He wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to kill the Demon Mountain, but before he could take advantage of the situation, he was yelled by Robert next to him. The sound interrupted. Enough, I said enough, it means everyone, and I will also ask you, Liano. Robert stopped Liano. Liano turned his head and looked at his brother, his eyes becoming innocent. Why did this brother look like he knew this? He knew what he wanted to do. This game ends here. Magic Mountain, you violate the rules of the competition. I deprive you of participating. Get out of my sight, the farther you want. Hearing Robert's words, the rebellious Demon Mountain looked dissatisfied, but he still picked up his big sword and left the field without looking back. What a pity. Leonor watched the general of the Lannister family escape from the front, and couldn't help but feel regretful. The great opportunity to cut off Lannister's wings slipped away in vain. His brother probably had forgotten the previous dealings with Lannister. I have an idea Robert is like this, just by hand due to the king's obstruction. Liano had no way to deal with Demon Mountain, so he had to sit back and pull the terrified Renly back to his seat. How could he let that bastard go? Renly came to her senses and sat next to Leonor and expressed his dissatisfaction with Robert with a low roar. The bastard almost killed Loras, don't you understand? He doesn't have that determination. Leonor spoke expressionlessly after a while of speech. Renly said muffled, I will never let that guy go. His tone was still unhappy, as if he had the urge to bite the Demon Mountain. Leonor knew that he was angry about Loras being almost killed, so he comforted him a few words, but was thinking more about how to strengthen it. Military power. If you fail to kill the Demon Mountain and cut off a great combat power of the Lannister family, you can only increase the pressure on your body to meet the future. There was a Demon Mountain who did not follow the rules to draw his sword and kill the horse. The martial arts competition made a bend before the climax of the decisive battle that should have arrived, but fortunately, things were different. Lolas almost died under the sword of the Demon Mountain. He was still scared and did not dare to force himself to compete with a hunter. Therefore, in the final against the hunter, he chose to admit defeat decisively and announced hundreds of nobles with his hand. He was the champion, ended the competition decently, and received cheers from countless girls in the boudoir as the champion. The hunter was held by Lolas as the champion, and for obedience to the king and helping Lolas in critical moments, it won the recognition and cheers of the audience, and obtained the highest honor and a bounty of 20,000 golden dragons. The team from the Midsummer Hall won the team battle championship, the nobleman Bane Dondarrion won the archery competition championship, and the final swordsman was won by a male red-robed monk wielding a flaming sword. The competition ended successfully. Robert completed the competition he was thinking about, and news came from the east on the other side that Lysa Tully was given the old nobles in the east at the Eagle Nest City, such as Race of Runes and Wayward of Iron Oak City. The siege was forced to remove the military equipment of Eagle Nest City. He was captured and sent to King's Landing. As for Robert Elan, the young man who should have been sent to King's Landing, was left behind by nobles such as Roose and Wayward, and claimed that this is the future heir of the valley and will be raised by their valley nobles. I want to cut off these bastards from the east. Robert was furious at the disobedient nobles of the east and roared at the imperial meeting. Robert was very angry, and then he got angry. After that, he should hunt and drink. He could not really attack the valley. His mood had not reached that level. Leonor was speechless about the performance of this brother. He even doubted himself. Robert took the king to this point and even put him in a lie. His ambitions were worn out. If you are just eating and waiting to die, what's the point of saving such a guy? I have to think of some ways to cheer him up again, and maybe it is time to let him know his situation. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42: Legalizing the Bastard. In the early morning, when the sun shone into the King's Hall of Red Fort, Cersei woke up from her sleep, pushed away her cousin Lansayer's hand, got up from the bed naked, and let her confidant maid wear it for her. Put on a silk dress, then drink a glass of wine that has been warmed up in advance, and sit on the balcony and wait for the new day to come. Cersei was enjoying the wine produced in Kingting Island and was aimlessly looking at the sky and sea outside the window. Suddenly, a confidant maid came over to report, "Mr. Queen, send Master Sir, let him come here." Cersei pursed her already slender lips, placed the silver wine glass back on the table, and put a dignified posture that she thought was in line with the Queen's identity. When the maid who left returned, she brought back the trembling Grand Secretary. "Good morning, sir." Paechel dragged a series of necklaces between his neck and came to the table to salute. "Tell me." Cersei maintained Lannister's usual arrogance. "Mr. Queen, recently Duke Ed, His Highness Leonor and Duke Renly often go to Tobu Mott." Paechel didn't care about Cersei's arrogance and directly told his news. "Tobu Mott? Who?" Cersei looked a little confused. "A blacksmith. He is the best skilled blacksmith in King's Landing, and he is also the leader of the King's Landing Blacksmith Guild." Paechel explained the origin of Tobu Mott to Cersei. Little character. Cersei's comments were full of contempt, but she had this qualification. After all, her husband was the only king in Westeros, and her father was one of the most powerful people in Westeros. The family is the richest and most powerful Lannister family. What matters is not the man Tobu Mott, but Duke Ed and the others went to him, and Duke John Elling also often went there during his lifetime. Seeing the Queen's mean words, Paechel couldn't help but remind him, "Don't men all like armored swords?" Cersei's face was indifferent, but he made some gestures. "What did those of them ask Tobu Mott for? I was also confused before today, but my servant told me that there was a child with black hair and blue eyes in that blacksmith shop." Paechel lowered his voice. "A child with black hair and blue eyes?" Cersei's expression suddenly became serious. "With black hair and blue eyes?" There were not many people with this characteristic, and Baratheon was a typical example. Seeing Cersei's expression becoming serious, Paechel was slightly brewing and was about to tell him something, but he didn't expect footsteps to come from his ears. He turned his head and saw that the disheveled Lancer came from the curtained room. He walked out and shouted, "Sister, Master Paciel." Lancel came out of the house and saw his sister sitting on the balcony as usual. There was an old, white-bearded man in the room. He couldn't help but look slightly panicked and subconsciously raised his hand to sort it out. "Your own clothes, okay, Lancel, go back to the king. Don't complain to me next time." Cersei's expression kept telling Lancel to leave, and explained that he was here to complain to his sister. Yes, Lancel looked slightly panicked, tidied up his clothes and walked out with his head down. He is a good young man. It would be great if he could have the courage of Lord James like a lion. Patrol watched Lancer walk out with a smile. Lord Kevin's son was very beautiful, not only inheriting Lannister's unique blonde hair, and her lips and teeth are red and white, which is even more beautiful than the little girl. I think in addition to the queen, Lord Renly should also like it very much. Continue. Have you seen the black-haired and blue-eyed child in the blacksmith shop? Cersei ignored Pychel's praise and asked him to continue the topic just now. No, but I sent one of my servants to see it. He drew a portrait and brought it back. Paciel took out a roll of parchment from his arms and unfolded it, revealing the sketch image inside. Cersei's breathing became heavy when he saw the boy's sketch on the parchment. His pupils dilated, and his face turned from carelessness to secret anger. It's not wrong, even if there is no connection. Cersei can recognize it at a glance. Even if the young man in the portrait does not have the characteristics of black hair and blue eyes, she can tell at a glance that this is the illegitimate son of her husband Robert. The two look exactly the same. The black-haired and blue-eyed apprentice Gendry in the blacksmith shop was like a mold carved with Robert when he was young. Robert was still a person who made Cersei expect and even love. Now, the queen is here. All that was left was anger. I understand. I will tell my father about your help. Cersei forced his anger and sent Paciel to leave. The old Grand Secretary owed behind him and left directly, leaving Cersei alone at the table and angry. Even though he was angry, Cersei cared more about Ed Stark, Leonor and others going to the blacksmith shop to find the child. Those people were definitely looking for the child, and they would not be able to look for the hair color. You can see the abnormalities between Joffrey, Tommen and Myrcella. Suspicion of being a dark ghost. Cersei had already incest with her younger brother James Lannister and gave birth to her 3 children now. Faced with some slight movement, she felt a chill in her body, so she said to her close confidant maid, "Take a word to James and ask him to come over. If he doesn't come, I'll go find him." James has been hiding from her since he came back from the north, which made Cersei very unhappy. Otherwise she wouldn't have brought her cousin Lancer to bed, but now it's not the time to care about this. Once that group of people bring the child back, it will definitely threaten Joffrey. No, at that time, not to mention Joffrey, even himself may not be able to keep it. You must first take action. When Cersei thought of the consequences of the exposure of her incest, all the anger in her heart turned into fear. The more she thought about it, the more she became. She felt that it was not enough to call James, the lover and brother, back to her side, so she found a confidant maid. "Go, find Pycelle, and ask him to send my father a crow. Send a sketch in his hand to my father, and tell him that Her Majesty the King wants to legalize one of his illegitimate sons. It is not rare for aristocrats to have illegitimate children. Even the extravagant nobles are proud of having a large number of illegitimate children, but legalizing illegitimate children is a dangerous signal. An illegitimate child is not popular with Westeros moral laws. An illegitimate child who can be publicly recognized by the nobles must be loved very well. Such an illegitimate child is very likely to shake the original inheritance status of the legitimate son." Cersei was afraid that her affairs would be exposed, and her father was afraid that she would be in mercy. So she fabricated a reason why Robb wanted to legalize his illegitimate son. When the maid went to find Pacier to release the crow, she still felt that it was not enough. He called a maid and asked her to give Genos Slint, the commander of the capital garrison, a bag of gold, and then check if there is a mercenary group in King's Landing. Chapter 43 Catalysis. In the early morning, under the balcony, Leonor leaned against the wall. Listening to Vincent sitting in a chair and reporting Cersei's movements to himself, he couldn't help but nod and asked, "Can you know what the letter Cersei sent to her father?" Because the intelligence organization was not perfect enough, he asked Vincent to try to push Gendry's existence to Cersei, only knowing that she had sent a message to her parents' home, but he didn't know what the specific content of the message was. "Your Highness, according to your opinion, our intelligence acquisition work is very careful, and it is carried out through intermediaries. Pycelle is loyal to the Lannister family, and his letters to Tywin were written and distributed by the Raven, and we cannot read them. Go to the contents inside. Vincent directly expressed his difficulties, and after a slight pause, he carefully said, the most important thing now is to deal with Janos. Cersei is buying people for her mother's family. The Lannister family is still in the western border and has time to buffer. The most threatening thing at the moment is Janos Slynt, who controls the capital garrison. Half of the golden robe under the control of that guy had inflated, and half of the woven had to pay him money. He was a guy who had both empty salary and had sex with soldiers. Even if he was not bribed by Cersei, he would have to deal with it sooner or later. Your intelligence work is done well. Intelligence work should be based on secrets and achieve the goal with secret means, so that the goal is not aware of the information being leaked. This is the highest goal, Leonor. He first praised Vincent's approach, and then said, as for the guy you mentioned to deal with Janos, I will make arrangements here. Your Highness has one more thing. Vincent wrote down Leonati's words one by one and mentioned another. I heard a news here. The injured young son of Duke Ed Stark, Lan Stark, seemed to wake up. How many days will Lisa Tilly go to King's Landing? Leonor thought about the situation and asked a question. He didn't expect that Bran would wake up at this critical moment. It will take about 3 more days. Vincent made an estimate. Lisa Tully is about to be taken to King's Landing City. Even if Catelyn is anxious, she will not be able to leave King's Landing City in the short term. If she does not return to the north, it means that she will arrest the little one in the original plot. The Devil's incident would not happen. In fact, that incident had already fluctuated when he killed Littlefinger. However, without this incident intensifying the conflict between the Wolf and Lion families, the TV plot could not be referenced again. Leonor was thinking about the overall situation. He had long thought of this situation and specially pushed Gendry's existence to Cersei for this purpose, but he couldn't imagine that it would be used so soon. Think of a way to remind our Prime Minister. Let him notice my brother's illegitimate son in the blacksmith shop. It would be better to make him feel kind and compassionate and protect that child. Can it be done immediately? Leonor asked a breast brother. I can pass the news indirectly to the Prime Minister. As for whether he has that kind heart, I will. Vincent dared not promise. Then do your best. Leonor felt enough to see Vincent being able to do this. After receiving the order, Vincent stood up and left directly. After Leonor sent him away, he summoned Doran and asked him how many soldiers and armored weapons he had in King's Landing, and whether he could be engaged in battle at any time. We are now about 1,500 people, 800 pairs of armor, 300 shields, 2,000 spears, 900 bows and crossbows and 90,000 arrows. Vincent gave the existing data. They were previously responsible for escorting food from the Midsummer Hall in Finksey Castle, and some of them came to participate in the competition. Stop everything, restrain all soldiers, organize them according to 3 people, 1 team, 10 people, 1 squadron, and 5 squadrons, and be prepared to respond to the battle at any time. Leonor said to Doric I made my own request. Even though I had a plot preparation as a high vision, Cersei was completely uncontrollable. She sent a letter to Tywin of Caer Rock City. I don't know what the content on the letter was. It is said that it is a coup in the palace, and even a war may come. He must be fully prepared. Yes. When Doric heard Leonor's request, he couldn't help but feel a stirring in his heart. He quickly responded, then quickly turned around and left. Call Master Sialio to me again, Leonor added again. He was not going to use Sialio as a guy who only worked, but now he doesn't care much about it. Hearing the request behind him, Doric hurriedly turned around and quickly left. After Leonor made various personnel arrangements, he closed his eyes and lay back on the rocking chair, visualizing a full moon shining through his body, suppressing the fluctuations of emotions with the moon gods in the star god temple in the heavens until footsteps approach. He opened his eyes and saw the guards leading Silio, who was wearing a stinging sword, walked over. Master Sialio, you are going to start working now, Leonor said directly to Sialio. No problem. Silio faced Leonor's words. His face with a hook nose was a little confused, but he nodded and responded. Then he held the sword around his waist and went straight to Leonor's side. One stop, and began to act as his personal guard. Vincent's move was very fast. No, simply put, he didn't even do anything, but when he returned to the courtyard in the evening, he told Leonor that he had rescued him from the 2 assassins sent by Cersei. Gandly, an apprentice at the blacksmith shop, then found someone to send him to Prime Minister Tower. Now the child has been asylum from Ed Stark, as Leonor asked. Very good. Leonor couldn't help but slapped his hands and looked joyful on his face. His plan went very smoothly. Next, it depends on whether the woman Cersei was crazy enough. As it turned out, Cersei was still crazy enough. After learning that Gendal fell into Ed Stark's hands, she found James Lannister, a brother and lover, overnight. "You have to find a way to kill the child?" Cersei asked to the bright and handsome brother with the blonde hair. "That's just an illegitimate child." James looked tired and didn't love him. "Yes, he is an illegitimate child, but as long as you see him, people will know that Joffrey, Tommen and Myrcella are my children and you, not the Fat King." Cersei's face was full of his face fears, narrating the pros and cons of it. "Stark does not have sufficient evidence." James' face suddenly became gloomy. "No, he has it. Don't forget that his son Bran was the one you pushed down the tower. Now, you have only one choice, either kill the child, or let me and Joffrey and others be tried. Tell me, how do you choose?" Cersei suddenly forced his lover to the corner and asked him to make a choice as a man, as a father, as a relative. James Lannister let out a sigh of relief. He had no choice. Chapter 44 Night Battle. In the dark night, there was silence in front of the Prime Minister's tower. Several soldiers from the north were whispering, discussing the difference between King's Land and Winterfell in a low voice to relieve sleep. Suddenly, a chaotic footstep surged, and they looked at it with a sound. They saw a group of soldiers wearing red lacquered armor emerge from the dark night of the Red Fortress of King's Landing City, and took the lead in a tall knight in white armor and white robes. Ilulu, wearing silver armor and white cloak. James held the reins and held the yellow warhorse under his crotch, stopped in front of the Prime Minister's tower, and looked at the Northland soldiers with a look of shock and incomprehension. He was in a very heavy mood, but reality could not allow him to think too much. James pressed down his thoughts, drew out his sword and waved it. The Lannister guards who followed him rushed forward and attacked the guards of the Prime Minister's tower with a spear in his hand. The Lannister family guards launched an attack, and James shook the reins in his hand, wielded the horse under his crotch, rushed directly into the Prime Minister's tower, shouting, Ed Stark, come out for me." James shouted while waving his sword, and killed several guards from the north, and rushed straight into the Prime Minister's tower with dozens of Lannister soldiers. He saw pajamas in the hall. "Ed Stark, James Lannister, are you crazy?" Ed was wearing a nightgown and holding a giant sword, and looking at James, who rushed straight into the Prime Minister's tower, and his subordinates who were lying in a pool of blood. He was almost angry. "Crazy, take that child over." James promptly stopped the warhorse and avoided rushing forward directly, but even so, the fast-moving warhorse was suddenly strangled, and it kept neighing, raised its hooves and almost swept Ed Stark's face facing the regicide who was riding on the horse. Ed could no longer suppress his anger. He lifted the giant sword in his hand. With just one sword, he slashed the head of the beast under the other party's crotch, and died. The warhorse lifted James off the back. "Tell me, what are you going crazy?" Ed held a giant sword in his hand and asked James, who was standing down with his horse's blood. When James saw his mount die, he felt relieved. He didn't like Stark, but he was unfair to sit and fight him immediately if it was a flat-level battle. He would not wear armor, but that would only be considered unlucky. James thought of this, lifted his sword and pointed it at Ed Stark. "Take that, get over to me, child." "What child?" Ed Stark looked incredible. Apart from Sansa and Arya, there was a child who came to surrender today, and there was no child at all. The child who came to surrender. Who is the child? Ed felt that he had found the key. James Lannister knew from Ed's expression that the other party knew nothing, but it was no longer possible for him to control it, so he stopped talking, but raised the sword in his hand. He went up and fought with Ed. As for the Lannister soldiers he brought, he had already rushed into the Prime Minister's tower as required before, searching for the king's illegitimate son Gendry, and robbed him, and made some money. Screams from women from time to time in the Prime Minister's tower. James Lannister and Ed Stark are both the strongest knights in the world. Ed Stark's weapons are stronger than James Lannister. But he was not wearing armor, and his wife and daughter screamed on his side, which made him completely useless to deal with James. Out of Ed's ignorance, James did not make a desperate move. He just wanted to fight him upright and successfully prevent him from interfering with his subordinates' search for the illegitimate child, so the two of them could not decide the outcome for a while. When the battle at Red Fort was fought here, Leonor, who had been paying attention to it, issued an order to let all the soldiers in King's Landing City wear armor and start to enter a state of fighting. Dorrit, send a team of soldiers to capture Lancer Lannister. Vincent, let your people lead the way. I want to live. Leonor was wearing a black steel armor, The silver-headed and red-handled nail-headed hammer was pinned behind the waist, with an arrow pouch on his waist, and a big red and white bow in his hand. The first order was to ask his confidant Dorat to catch someone. Yes, Dorat was also wearing military uniforms. He had already learned about Leonor's overall plan in advance. After the sound of the voice, he immediately arranged 10 soldiers who were already wearing armor to capture them in the Red Fort under Vincent's leadership. People, others, Dorat, go and command the soldiers in our city, control the capital garrison in the name of the king. As for Genos Slint, kill him in the name of the king. Vincent, still send yours people go to lead the way, Leonor ordered in an orderly manner. Yes, 30 soldiers dressed in armor left with Dorat in military uniform, and loud noises quickly sounded in the Red Fort and the city. Many soldiers from the Midsummer Hall were wearing armor and came out from all over the city, using the king. In the name of the Red Fort and the major gates of King's Landing City in the Red Fort, Dorat took away more than 30 soldiers, and Leonor had more than 50 soldiers left. He left behind a dozen soldiers guarding his female accountant holding a crossbow, and then took Silly with him. And about 30 soldiers rushed to the Prime Minister's tower. On the Prime Minister's tower, the battle between James and Ed has reached a heightened level, but the Lannister soldiers panicked after slaughtering and searching. They did not find the black-haired and blue-eyed illegitimate child requested by their adults, so he hurried to the living room of the Prime Minister's tower and shouted to James, who was stabbed on his shoulder, "Sir, there is no the child, where is that child? Hand him over." James was hit by a sword in his armor, and scratched Ed's right leg with a close sword. He successfully put the other party on the ground, pointed his sword at the throat, and came out. Voice requirements, don't think about it. Ed felt the chill in his throat and gasped and refused. Not to mention what the child had, even if he was an ordinary child, he would not tolerate the other party being taken away by Lannister's bad species. Then you go. Seeing Ed's stubbornness, James felt a little ruthless. He wanted to kill Ed when he sent his sword to the tip of his sword, but before he could make up his mind, he felt that his back heart was heavy, and the skin under the armor was covered with armor. It hurt, as if something had been nailed. When I turned my head and saw that the sound of breaking through the air was heard everywhere. More than a dozen feather arrows flew out of the darkness, shooting several Lannister's soldiers to death. Kill all those wearing red armor. Leonor wore iron armor and opened the big bow in his hand after entering the Prime Minister's tower. He shot James, who forced Ed to knock him down. Who made him wear white clothes? Is so dazzling in the dark night. The soldiers of the Midsummer Hall who followed Leonor first shot several Lannister guards at a distance of 30 steps, then drew their swords and rushed into the Prime Minister's tower, and began with Lannister guards. Close combat. Leonor shouted the loudest slogan, but he did not fight at close range, but stood in a distance, raising his bow and shooting at James Lannister. Chapter 45. Crazy Woman. When the sun rose again, blood was already flowing in the Prime Minister's tower. James Lannister had been knocked down. He half-kneeled on the ground, with more than 10 arrows inserted into his body, like a stinger. Even with armor protection, the deepest arrows have already penetrated into the skin. James raised his head and swept his eyes over several soldiers in the summer hall, focusing on the bows and long swords around their waists. He was surprised by the combat effectiveness of these soldiers in the summer hall. Last night, the subordinates he brought were almost all. These guys killed them all, and they had almost no casualties. They could draw bows from a long range and draw swords from a close range. They were quite excellent soldiers, no less than some knights. James judged the soldiers in the summer hall with his old eyes. His eyes swept across several soldiers, and finally fell on Leonor, who was holding Ed. He looked at him with black hair and blue eyes, black armor, and shoulders. The bow and arrow were tied with a nail-headed hammer behind his waist, and his face and spirit were completely out of reach, and he couldn't help laughing out loud. Leonor helped Ed, who had injured his foot, turned his head and looked at James, who was laughing, and ignored him. He just asked Ed how his foot injury was. However, the Duke of Stark ignored him and limped. He walked to James, who laughed out loud and asked him, "Who is the child?" No matter how stupid Ed was, he knew that the child who came to seek his protection yesterday had a problem. "You don't know anything." James knew that things had reached this point, and it was meaningless to say more. He just laughed at Ed in front of him, then turned his head to look at Leonor next to him and asked him, "Do you know what I'm thinking? As the royal guard, you tried to murder the king's hand, and such a crime was like treason, but I think you don't care about what kind of crime you will be charged with." Leonor ignored James's words. "I'm thinking, you're really like Robert back then." James sneered and shook his head, saying what he said in his heart. The guy later became king, married Cersei, and became fat. The speaker is unintentional, and the listener is intentional. Ed was a little angry at James' attitude. He heard what he said. It looks like Robert. He subconsciously turned his head and looked at Leonor's face, then looked at James half kneeling on the ground, and then recalled. The child who came to defect yesterday couldn't help but feel moved. You came for that child? Ed asked James again. HMPH, the Blood Knight groaned, refusing to answer any questions. I understand. Ed looked down at James' brilliant blonde hair, and couldn't help but understand it all at once. What do you understand? James was a little anxious when he saw Ed's appearance. Why did he understand now? Joffrey is not Robert's child, he is your child, right? The child was Robert's illegitimate child yesterday, right? I remember John went to the blacksmith shop during his lifetime, and he had been reading through the great nobles before his death. I remember talking about the family tree, which is set in it, the combination of Baratheon and Lannister. All the children are black and blue-eyed. Ed figured out a lot of things at once. You're not right. Seeing that Ed really figured it out, James couldn't help but feel a little anxious. He raised his body hard. But the arrows embedded in the flesh and the soldiers who were forced to control him again. Hurry, Leono, go see Robert with me. Ed didn't care much, and turned around and prepared to go to see Robert. Where was Robert last night? Leonor held Ed's stretched arm. He didn't see the king show up last night. Where did that guy go? He went to the brothel. Ed looked anxious. Leonor's face collapsed when he heard Ed's answer. That bastard could really do it. Just as Leonor was about to go to find Robert with Ed, Balliston hurried over. The old royal guard ignored the corpses all over the ground, and James with a feathered arrow, and went directly to Leon. In front of Noah and Ed, they took a look at Ed's leg injury first, and then revealed a fact. The king is dead. What? Leonor was shocked. How could his brother die? Did the person Dorrit arranged for not catching Lancel? No, the young man who was not so bold to kill the regicide was the one who sent the others to do it. Yes, Leonor suddenly thought of it. Cersei encouraged James to ask Ed for his illegitimate child as a cover, in order to create chaos, so that her killer could have a chance to attack Robert, and Robert went to the brothel to give him a chance to the killer can take advantage of the opportunity. That woman was indeed crazy. She thought she was desperate, but she didn't expect it to be a waste of money. His Majesty the King went to Silk Street through the tunnel last night without telling me. He found a woman there, and I only got news in the church in the morning, Balliston said with a little hesitant face, and the king he was loyal to was dead again. Where's that assassin? Leonor asked anxiously. After the initial shock, he accepted the fact that Robert was dead. Cersei's fireworks under the cauldron were indeed unexpected, but it caught him off guard, and he even felt that he was instead of the sadness you imagine. You feel more relaxed. Run. Balliston opened his mouth. Can you find it? Ed also accepted the facts in silence and asked whether old Balliston could find the murderer. Maybe, but what's important now? Take Robert's body back to Redfort first, and then control everyone in the brothel. Leonor, go and inform Lord Renly, Lord Syl and Master Varys to come. Ed was injured while supporting his leg. Make arrangements. Okay. Leonor did not refuse, and directly asked someone to pass the message. At the same time, he asked Dorrit, who came back to report, to take people to control Cersei soon. Robert's body was carried back from the Silk Street in the city. The fat king who had once spitted and cursed was really dead. He died on the prostitute's belly and had a short knife in his heart. While Leonor was looking for someone to summon other former ministers of the Imperial Council, he sent people to control Cersei, but found that the crazy woman had actually ran away. Not only her, but even Joffrey, Tommen and Myrcella were not seen. Now crazy woman, what a crazy woman. Lyanna's scalp was numb. He never expected that the woman would be so crazy that she didn't even want her brother or lover. After assassinating her husband, she ran away with her children. By the way, she must have taken the child back to Caen City. She asked Syl to write to Tywin before, and must have Tywin sent troops to support her chase. You must catch Cersei, and you can't let her run away with Joffrey, Tommen and Myrcella. Leonor immediately sent someone out of the city to chase after him, and took him back to the King's Hall to inform Ed, Balliston, Renly, Pasil and Varys about the news. Chapter 46 Discussion. In the King's Hall, when he heard that Cersei had run away with his 3 children, the other ministers in the imperial meeting were shocked and could not speak. Only Renly spoke first. The facts are obvious now. The woman and Lannister killed my brother and then absconded for fear of guilt. What big thing happened in ancient and modern times, and both in China and abroad? The first time it was to determine the responsibility. Renly also attributed Robert's death to Cersei, and named Cersei's escape with her children as fear of sin after murder abscond. Mr. Ed, her brother attacked you last night and was obviously assigned by her because she was afraid that some of her secrets would be exposed, Renly said as she tried to win over Ed and let him stand up for his statement. But what secret made her do this? Boleston said he didn't understand. Let me say it. Ed stood up. He looked at Renly and Leonor first. Seeing Leonor expressionless, and after Renly nodded, he remembered James's massive killing last night. The king is dead again, and no matter what concerns are now, he no longer hides them and says, I looked through the aristocratic family tree left by John Ellen during his lifetime and found a fact that the offspring born to the marriage between Baratheon and the Lannister family were all black and blue, and yesterday there was one. The child was almost killed, and he ran to the Prime Minister's tower for my asylum. James Lannister brought people to the Prime Minister's tower last night and said he wanted to find him, black hair and blue eyes, wouldn't he? Boleston, who first heard the secret of the royal family, was shocked. The 3 children of the current King Robert were all blonde. They thought they had inherited their mother's hair color. Now it seems that they are all illegitimate children of Cersei and others. It seems that the old Prime Minister was poisoned by the Lannister family after discovering this matter, and Lord Ed, you were almost killed because of this matter. Renly followed Ed's words to the Lannister family. He put on another hat, and also a little stimulating Ed. Yes, Ed sighed directly. He was not Ed, but all the entourages brought from the north were killed by the Lannister family, and his wife, daughter, and the king's illegitimate son were also unknown. Suddenly, there was no sound in the hall. There were 6 ministers present at the imperial meeting. In addition to the 2 honest men, Ed and Boleston, Leonor, Renly, Pasil and Varys knew the cause of the incident. They are just pretending to be stupid for their own personal gain. The most important thing now is how we deal with Lannister. The people I sent out may not be able to catch up with Cersei. Leonor felt a little guilty at this time, but when he thought of Cersei who escaped, he felt that this was the case. Embarrassment and speechlessness are just a waste of time. Cersei fled back to the west with her and other people's evil seeds. The Lannister family will definitely not agree with their statement. Renly nodded, and the most important thing next was how to settle the Lannister family. It's true, but there is another more important thing. Ed spoke wildly, pointing to the inheritance of the Iron Throne. There is nothing more important than defending against Lannister. Renly interrupted Ed. As far as I know, Cersei sent a letter to the Lannisters' house before, and they might arrive at any time. Leonor glanced at Pasil, who had been silent. His words surprised him and raised his head to see everyone. They all looked at themselves, and were so scared that they hurriedly covered their expressions, not daring to speak nonsense anymore, which attracted suspicion. Ed, what do you think? Renly couldn't help but feel energetic when she saw Leonor supporting her and asked Ed. The Duke of North looked at the Baratheon brothers deeply, knowing that his words had been blocked by the 2, so he could only give up the matter of inheriting the throne. The most important thing at the moment is indeed to deal with Lannister's army. I suggest that it is better to mobilize the whole city now. Boleston made the suggestion immediately. Lannister's army plundered King's Landing in Robert's War of seizing the throne. If they did not respond, they would definitely repeat it. Come again, I have arranged someone to do it, Mr. Boleston. I hope you will organize the manpower. Leonor did not hesitate. Last night, he took the opportunity to kill Dennis Slint and at the same time incorporated the entire King. The Robe is now working on martial law and strengthening the city defense. Okay, Boleston was unstoppable. Master sir, please release the crews for me to all the nobles, tell them the whole story of what happened in King's Landing, and at the same time ask the nobles of the river and Stormland to send troops to defend King's Landing. Renly also asked Patrol not to hide his intimate relationship with the River Bay. Yes, Patrol did not dare to hesitate and bowed directly to answer the order. Mr. Ed, don't you send people from the north? Renly said to Ed. He was not very satisfied with the reaction of the North Duke. Sir Renly, the nobles in the river and Stormland are enough to fight against the Lannister army, and then mobilize other troops. Only the civilians will be hurt. Ed's face was a little tired. I agree with Lord Ed's words. The distance between the north is too far, and I'm on guard against the Great Wall. It's better not to move for the time being. Leonor agreed with Ed's words. The bandits are like combs and the soldiers are like washing. The discipline of the nobles' armed forces is not good, and they will rob the civilians along the road. Seeing that Leonor supported Ed, Renly could only nod. Leonor then turned to Varys, who had not spoken. Varys, please help your little birds to monitor Dorne's movements, and it's best to find out the number of troops in the Western Front. Yes, Varys nodded and said yes, that's it. Everyone does their own things. Leonor made a final statement, and Balliston, Pisser and Varys immediately separated, leaving only Leonor, Renly and Ed on the scene. My brother, don't worry, I've sent someone to find Mrs. Catelyn, Sansa, Arya and my brother's illegitimate child, and a message will come soon. Leonor comforted Ed. Now you should be very worried about your family. Thank you. Ed showed gratitude on his tired face. His entourage was killed by the Lannister family. Now Leonor helps him find a wife and daughter. How could he not be grateful? If nothing else, then Renly and I will leave first. Leonor comforted Ed, shook Lanley's eyes and left the King's Hall. Don't you talk to him for a while. Lanley followed Leonor away from the King's Hall, his face a little complicated. What do you want me to say? Let him support me on the throne. Leonor turned his head and looked at Renly. What if I want you to support me? Lanley's expression cheered. Why? It's not Stannis, it's me behind me. Give me a reason. Leonor looked at Renly with a corner of his eyes, asking him to give himself a suitable reason. Chapter 47 Persuasion. Seeing that Leonor was speaking harshly, Renly was not surprised but happy because he felt that Leonor had the reason. As long as there was a reason, he could successfully get Leonor's support. Do you have an army? Lanley asked a question. Not enough. Leonor was a little depressed. It was still far from participating in the battle for the 2,000 soldiers who had not experienced bloody battles. I have. The nobles in the Stormland and the River Baylands obeyed my orders, and I have made a covenant with the Tyrion family. Lanley was very confident. The reason is very good, but Stannis is not bad. Ed will definitely support him. Leonor asked another question. Strength is indeed a key point in becoming king, and it is more important than status, but Stannis not bad either. With Ed Stark's character, the Northland will not hesitate to support Stannis with the highest inheritance rights. Therefore, Stannis and Renly are equally divided, and Stannis can also rely on inheritance rights to occupy the name of righteousness. Lanley has many allies, the most powerful military power. Stannis has the most reputation, and he has nothing, so he can only wait for the opportunity. I like Lola's. He and I cannot have descendants. I will make you my crown prince. Lanley put forward a fact and drew a big pie for Leonor. I want to be a storm. Leonor shook his head directly. This kid is really okay and will use words to coax him. He is really willing to make him the crown prince. Just marry Margaret to him and declare that he is not married. Now, yes, as long as you promise to support me, I will grant you the king's hand and crown prince, and Finksy Castle will also give you the fiefdom. Lanley agreed without hesitation. What do you want me to do? Leonor nodded. Since you yearn for it so much, let you touch the black magic of the Red God Priest. Help me convince Ed. Lanley made a demand. He urgently needed to weaken Stannis' threat, and Leonor, who has control over King's Landing, is the most suitable thing to do. Okay, I will try my best to persuade you. Lannister will leave it to you. Leonor agreed. Good. After some discussion, Leonor and Renly made a division of labor, and Leonor convinced Ed to weaken Stannis' power, while Renly organized the nobles of the Stormland and the River Bay to deal with Lannister family. After Leonor returned to his courtyard, he received a reply from the Sent People saying that he had not chased Cersei, but found Duke Ed's wife, Mrs. Catelyn Tully and her 3 children outside the city without saying a word. Leonor immediately took someone to look for him and found that it was indeed Mrs. Catelyn with Sansa, Arya and Gendry. The 4 of them were all covered in dust. Except for Gendry's clothes, the 3 girls were also wearing loose clothes. Nightgown. Madam Catelyn, how did you come out of the Red Fort? Leonor knew that it was Arya who left the secret passage. He wanted to find the secret passage a long time ago, but he had never found it. I don't know, but I just heard the shouts outside. My husband asked me to hide with my daughter. We suddenly arrived outside the city in a panic. It's really a blessing from the gods. Catelyn Tully held Sansa with her legs. He leaned against Arya, staring at her eyes and trying to pretend to be foolish, which made Arya, who was leaning against her legs, cover her mouth and almost laugh. It was not until her mother kicked her with her feet and suppressed her smirk. Madam, tell me the truth. I want to strengthen the defense of Red Fort now, and you don't want anyone to break into Red Fort from unexpected places. Leonor held Arya's expression in his eyes. Some of them were so angry that she reminded her how important this was. Okay. We came out of a secret passage. The secret passage was discovered by my daughter. The exit was now under the cliff over there. Seeing that Catelyn couldn't get through, he could only point Leonor Road. Thank you for your guidance. Please go back to the Red Fort first. Lord Ebb misses you very much. After returning to the Red Fort, can Miss Arya lead me? Leonor turned his attention to Arya. Want her to take the entrance of the secret passage in the Red Fort? Why? Arya blurted out directly. I'll give you a nice cracked steel sword. Leonor knew Arya's preferences very well. Okay, that's it. Arya was instantly bribed, seeing Arya easily moved by a promise. Mrs. Catelyn couldn't help rolling her eyes, but she thought that she already knew the existence of the secret passage and there was no need to hide it anymore. She could only give up other ideas and go with Leon. No returns to Red Fort out of the need for the forces in the north. Leon was very attentive to Catelyn and his daughter, and personally sent them back to the Red Fort to reunite with Ed Stark, which naturally won the other party's gratitude. Mr. Ed, can you talk privately? Leonor invited him. While Ed was grateful, Ed hugged his wife, and when he heard Leonor's private chat request, he couldn't help looking at the black-haired and blue-eyed prince. Seeing him looking at him with a serious face, he knew that there might be something important to say, so he patted his wife and asked her to take the children away. Mrs. Catelyn took the children away, and Leonor also gave a wink to Sialio beside her. The guard also waved to the guards tactfully, and left and right to warn, leaving the space for Leonor. With Ed, Mr. Ed, I had a conversation with Renly today, and I decided to support him in the battle for the Iron Throne. Leonor went straight and just say it out loud. Ed Stark was shocked by Leonor and said after a while, the heir to the top is Stannis. I knew you would say that. Leonor nodded. You mean to let me support Renly? Ed asked Leonor's opinion. My suggestion is to ask you not to interfere in this matter. Be neutral. Renly will not give up. Stannis is also a bad temper. In terms of relationships, I support Renly and promise to help him convince you, but I know you, so I don't want to convince you to support him. I just hope you can be neutral. Leonor said his thoughts. Why? Ed asked a question. Why did Leonor do this? Does he have no idea about the Iron Throne? I am unwilling to participate in their competition now, and I am not able to participate, so I chose to support the stronger army, Renly, so that the war will end as soon as possible, and not cause more harm to the civilians. Leonor found a high-sounding title. The reason is that it is useless to persuade people like Ed, and they have to use moral kidnapping. Sure enough, Ed, who attached great importance to fame, fell silent after hearing Leonor's reasons, thinking about whether to bring the northern border and the entire country into war times. You can think slowly. I'll wait for your answer. Leonor didn't press Ed step by step. He believed that the Duke of Winterfell would make the right choice. What if I want to go back to the north now? And I will regret it when I return to the north. Ed couldn't help but call Leonor and told him a possibility. If you are willing to leave, you can do it any time. Leonor bowed slightly, and he still believed in this person's character. Chapter 48 Secret Way. Ed Stark did not agree to Leonor's words or requested to leave King's Landing. He was in a dilemma, but this also meant that he was shaken. Leonor was very satisfied with Ed's reaction. He happily went to find Arya and asked her to lead herself to the entrance of the secret passage in the Red Fort under the walls of the basement of a room in the Prime Minister's tower. Arya stopped and said to Leonor, Sialio and many guards behind him, it's here. There's nothing here. Leonor was a little confused. When he walked to the wall, he suddenly found a narrow hole in the wall, as if it had been there all the time, and it seemed like it suddenly flashed out. I'll go down and take a look. Silio stepped forward and recommended himself with a stabbing sword around her waist. Please be careful, Mr. Sialio. Leonor did not object. Sialio was a close master of swordsmanship. If he might encounter unexpected situations, it would be better for him to go down. When Sialio drilled into the cave on the wall, Leonor was slightly stunned and found that the hole seemed to disappear again, but when he concentrated slightly, the entrance to the secret passage appeared again. Leonor took a breath slightly. There seemed to be some magic obstacle here. Leonor glanced at the left and right, closed his eyes slightly, visualized himself, and his soul turned into a bright moon and flew out from his head, landing on the entrance of the secret passage. When he touched it, he felt countless small thoughts attached, just like it swept like a fly, trying to block his gaze. The interference of these thoughts can make people subconsciously ignore the holes on the wall. The stronger the spiritual consciousness, the more disturbed it is. On the contrary, ordinary people with firm will be more likely to pass through. It's really a spell. Leonor felt it carefully, and felt hesitation, anxiety and determination from the thought of countless fly gathering. After searching deeply, he saw countless scenes from it in those pictures. There are coolies working day and night under the whip, craftsmen who are lucky enough to miss their family, and corpses piled up all over the palace, but in the corners of no one, there are still some people constantly digging and controlling the tunnels. It seems that these are the thoughts left by the craftsmen who built the Red Fort. They prayed over the years, and in the bloody field where Maja was slaughtered and silenced, they attached their last resentment to the entrance of the secret passage, forming a natural and unique maze, like the folk legend of ghosts hitting a wall, forming a magic cover for the entrance to the secret passage. No wonder I spent more than 10 years finding these secret passages. Leonor suddenly felt relieved. It was not because he was not lucky, but because he opened his golden finger, so he was blocked. What are you thinking? Arya's words pulled Leonor back to reality. Watching the history here, the secret passages here should be left by the craftsmen who built the Red Fort back then. The legend of the craftsman was destroyed by the cruel Maja. Now it seems that it is true. These secret passages are from the time the craftsmen stayed for their escape. Leonor answered casually, "Oh, then how would you do to the big bull?" Arya didn't care about history and turned her eyes to a young man with black hair and blue eyes behind her. "Big bull." Leonor raised his head and looked at the blacksmith apprentice who had been following Arya's gaze. "You mean Gendry? He is my brother's illegitimate son, and of course he will be with me in the future." Leonor looked at the former blacksmith apprentice and nodded slightly to give him a smile. "What do you want to take him to do?" Arya asked. "That depends on what he wants to do." "Gendry, what do you want to do?" Leonor asked at Gendry, who was not talking. Gendry faced his uncle, who looked similar, and didn't know how to answer. He always thought that his father was an ordinary person. He never thought that he had become an illegitimate child, and he was also a noble illegitimate child. Don't say you want to be king. The illegitimate child has no inheritance rights. Your surname can only be Wishu. Leonor gave Gendry a vaccination. Before all Baratheon's death, the illegitimate child had no inheritance rights. Yes, he didn't plan to die. No, I want to be a soldier. Gendry quickly shook his head and found a target for himself, indicating that he would not cross the boundary. A good idea. Let's go back and arrange for you to join the army with Arad. As for whether you can become a general, it depends on your own. Leonor nodded and encouraged, setting a way for Gendry. What about me? I want to be a general, too. Arya has always been absent from red dresses and loves armed forces. When she heard about something related to combat, she became excited and asked Leonor if she could become a general. "You ask your father, you are not my daughter," Leonor complained. "This little girl is a bohemian and free-spirited person, so she is not a soldier." Just as he was talking, a bald head emerged from the hole under the wall, with a sour smell all over his body. It was Sialio, who had crawled into before. He was holding the sword in his hand and his face was very depressed. "Thank you for your hard work, Master Sialio." Leonor saw Sialio like this, stepped forward and pulled him out, and asked the guards to arrange a bath. "There is no danger below, it just leads to a filthy cave under the sea cliff, which leads to outside the Red Castle." Sialio glanced at Leonor and took his hand and switched his sword to the other hand, first stroked his chest with his hand and explained the situation to Leonor, then stepped back and went to change the wash. Leonor learned of the situation and was too lazy to go on, so as not to make his body stinking. He just sent soldiers to explore the space, and then cleaned, guarded and summarized it so that people would not touch it through this secret passage again. There were all the secret passages under the Red Fort, and Leonor sent 110 soldiers down, and soon remembered the situation almost the same, and found the entrance and exit of the secret passages one by one in the outside world without exception. The entrances and exits of the secret passages scattered all over the Red Fort are covered by a maze formed by countless thoughts. Those maze cover techniques are just natural illusions, and can be immune as long as they are firm in their will. However, it is of great significance to Leonor, because the Taoist scriptures he obtained only talk about how to practice and strengthen the soul, but rarely talk about it. How to use the soul to cast magical magic and confusing the mind, and this maze can be used as a reference. Not only is it of reference significance, but the soldiers who went down to explore also discovered some unexpected gains. They found some caves inside, filled with sand, and a circular pot was buried inside, with a shiny area inside. A green liquid that burns when it is fire. When he heard the soldiers' reports, Leonor's scalp exploded almost directly. Of course, he knew what it was. He immediately ordered all soldiers to leave the cave, and then blocked the entrances and exits of all underground secret passages, prohibiting any idle people, etc. Especially it is idler who brings fire to the underground secret passage of Red Fort, especially the underground secret chamber close to storing wildfires. If those piles of wildfires exploded, let alone Red Fort, I am afraid that the entire King's Landing city would be scrapped. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 Wildfire. Wildfire was a weapon that Aegon IV, the 11th king of the Targaryen dynasty, ordered the Flame Warlock to produce a weapon to replace the dragon. It was a liquid with a forgiveness color and was flammable and explosive. After losing the dragon that can be relied on, the kings of the Targaryen dynasty were extremely obsessed with wildfires. Some tried to rehatch the dragon eggs with wildfires, and eventually burned the royal summer palace. Some used wildfires to kill others, which caused the collapse of the dynasty. The latter is the crazy King Aerys II. When Lob killed Rhaega on the Trident River, Mad King Aerys II planned to burn together. He buried a large amount of wildfire in King's Landing and ordered his royal guard, James Lannister, to ignite himself. Let the residents of the city be buried with him, but James did not obey. James Lannister killed Aerys II and saved the entire King's Landing, thus gaining the nickname Rainslayer. He did not reveal the truth of the matter to the outside world, and at the same time, it also caused a large number of wildfires to be sealed in every corner of the city until Leonor sent his men to search for the underground secret passages of Red Fort. Leonor had heard of the name of wildfire for a long time, but he thought that he could refine purple thunder gunpowder, so he didn't care much about this thing at all. When he suddenly discovered this thing today, he couldn't help but become interested and asked his soldiers to complete the blockade, personally go to the underground secret passage to see the truth, and dig out a few cans of wildfires from the sand and soil to bring them out. When the green liquid sealed in the jar was opened in the dim light, it emitted a bit of luster green light, spraying green water vapor like carbonated soda, but it didn't smell any. If the wildfires moved to the light, the bright light will automatically converge and become ordinary, as if it is just a pool of ordinary liquid. Leonor brought a can of wildfire to the open space and opened it. The strong sunlight only shone for a minute. The can of wildfire immediately began to boil, and the green mist surged like a spring. When it reached the ignition point, it burned automatically and turned into a ball. The green fire was sprayed violently, and a can of the same size as the head burned for more than 10 minutes before it was burned out. This thing is good, find me some charcoal. Leonor glanced at the way the wildfire occurred and felt it was very interesting. He asked the soldiers to find the corresponding materials for themselves, and then tried to use the alchemy method in the Taoist scripture to deal with the liquid state wildfires are treated. Leonor grinds the charcoal and mixes it, and then uses it to absorb the wildfire liquid to facilitate stabilizing its form and increase stability. The wildfire that turned into solid state no longer evaporates, and the boiling point and ignition point have increased a lot. At least it no longer starts to boil and spontaneously ignite when it is just shining by light. It must be close to the open flame to ignite it. The combustion speed is extremely fast, but no explosion occurs. Wildfires are very interesting, but Leonor doesn't have much time to study this now. The news that Robert was conspired to assassinate by Lannister brothers was taken to various territories of Westeros by the Crow, which soon caused shock to the princes of the Seven Kingdoms due to the limitations of communication conditions. Leonor did not intuitively feel the shock of the world in King's Landing. Everything seemed to have happened, but the golden robe of King's Landing and the soldiers of the Midsummer Hall strengthened the city defense under the leadership of Balliston, but no enemy came, making these alert actions ridiculous, until the Tully family and Hygieinde the messengers came to King's Landing. The first messenger of the Tully family sent good news. They caught Cersei and his son who fled to Hygieinde, but the news was soon overthrown by the second messenger. Cersei and his son were Stannis. The Teff family army snatched it back, and then Lannister's army began to invade Hygieinde. The third envoy of the Tully family directly asked King's Land for military support. When Leonor received the news, he did not hesitate and immediately convened a meeting of the imperial court, gathering Ed, Renly, Balliston, Pasil and Varys to discuss how to deal with it. We must send troops to Hygieinde immediately, and we cannot let Lannister continue like this. Ed, who has a strong sense of justice, gave his opinion without hesitation. Leonor turned his eyes to Renly. There are now 6,000 soldiers in King's Landing City, and they are not trained enough to divide their troops to support Hegian. Among the people present, Stark's army is still in the north. Only Renly has an army. I have already negotiated with the princes in Huandi. Their troops are gathering towards Qukeo. I will take these troops to Hegiandi to personally eliminate the rebellious Lannister family. Renly was imposing, as if Stannis was a thriller. The Tef family can only kill them, and his tone pauses slightly, and then brings up another sensitive topic. Actually, whether it is Lannister or other enemies, we are secondary. The most important thing at the moment should be to determine our new king as soon as possible. Hearing Renly's words, even Leonor couldn't help but get nervous and finally came last time. When Ed mentioned this topic, Renly interrupted him, and this time he took the initiative to mention this topic, and it seems that he is fully prepared. According to the inheritance law, Pachel spoke in a humming voice as the Grand Secretary. At this time, our country is facing huge problems. And the old and stale rules should change. Renly was not satisfied with Pycial's words and turned his attention to Leonor. I support Renly. Leonor did not hesitate when facing Renly's gaze and directly said something that made other ministers other than Ed dissatisfied. Don't look at me like this. Now Renly has the power to destroy Lannister and avenge Robert. He can also use this power to bring peace to the people, so I support him. Leonor faced everyone. His eyes expressed his views concisely. Mr. Ed. Pachel turned his attention to the only active Ed Stark. If anyone could object at the scene, it was the hand of the Duke and King of the North. Ed sighed deeply when facing Percher's gaze, closed his eyes directly, and began to act as a wooden man. Ed's expression was equivalent to acquiescence. Pycelle and Varys were both silent. After pondering for a while, Balliston spoke. I agree with His Highness Leonor. Balliston was the captain of the Royal Guard and the benchmark of the world's knights. His vote of approval made Renly look happy and stood up and expressed his opinion. My ability may not be enough, but if everyone supports me, I believe I can definitely govern this country well. Swear in the name of the Seven Gods, in the name of the Iron Throne, in the name of the King. Westeros has no particular concern about 3 words and 3 reassurances. With 6 people present in the Imperial meeting, the 3 were silent and neutral. When the 2 agreed, Renly successively used the 7 Gods, Iron Throne and King. He swore in the name of the King, and there was no objection to the congregation. Chapter 50 Negotiation. After Renly finished speaking, she thought she would get a burst of applause, but there was a silence on the long table of the Imperial meeting. Balliston was willing to cheer or even swear allegiance, but when she saw that the others did not move, it was difficult to stand up until Leonor stood up. Thank you, My Majesty. Leonor stood up and gave Renly a favor. We are willing to believe that you can govern this country well, but the premise is that you need to settle external and internal troubles, and then we can be in Beller. The Great Hall watched you crowned as king, and at the same time swear allegiance to you. The Great Church of Baelor was built by Baelor I of the Targaryen dynasty, and it was also the headquarters of the Seven Gods Church of Westeros. The kings of Targaryen will receive crowning there, and the Baratheon dynasty will also be continued this practice. Okay, I will. Renly was filled with confidence when he heard Leonor's words. He now had the coalition of princes from the Stormland, Huonland and Hegianland, and it was just a little bit to settle Lannister. Renly, Your Majesty, I remind you that you should make some preparations before you eliminate Lannister. Varys also carefully changed his respect for Lannister. I got the news that Lord Stannis' fleet as I set out earlier and the destination is your Fancy Castle. I knew he would do this for a long time. Renly had a look of I had expected this for a long time. He did expect Stannis' approach and was ready to deal with it, so that only the Huon area could. The princely troops stayed at the Ku Bridge, and the troops in the Stormland were still staying in the territory. This is the response to this situation according to the previous agreement with Leonor. Renly said, I'll go and solve this problem myself. I want to go and see it, too. Leonor stood up. I'll go too. Ed also stood up. If Renly had to act alone, he would definitely kill Stannis. He could not let such a thing happen. Then let's go together. Renly saw Leonor and Ed stand up one after another, and the smile on his face became a little reluctant, because he felt that these 2 people were probably trying to stop him from killing Stannis. Ed's idea is indeed to save Stannis' life. As for Leonor, this time he wanted to see the magic power of the Red God Priest. After entrusting the matter of King's Landing to the commander of Balliston, Syl and Varys assisted. Leonor and Ed followed Renly, and under the escort of more than 30 knights, they rushed back to Fancy Castle at night. When Leonor rode his horse outside the Windsky Castle, he saw thousands of sails competing on the sea. Stannis' fleet had already set up camp on the beach, and the Windsky castle was also full of flags. Leonor followed Renly Sinchi into the city and met Sir Codus Pontilus, who acted as the city lord, to find out the current situation. Mr. Stannis' fleet landed 2 days ago. Part of his army was on the shore and part of it on the ship. The total number should be about 5,000 people. It is said that he had obtained the surrender of some pirates in the sea. It was the Onion Knight. Davos was holding a thread for him, and I also heard that he and many of his men had converted to the Red God faith, and they publicly burned the scriptures and icons of the 7 gods. Codus left a yellow color her beard, just like the sophistication of the past, reported to Renly and everyone what she knew. What do you think? Renly sat in the main seat and sought the opinions of Leonor and Ed. Leonor did not answer. He glanced at Ed next to him and received his gaze. The Duke of North asked, "Did Stannis send an envoy?" "No." Codus shook his head. "Send an envoy to ask first," Leonor asked. Perhaps Stannis would change his mind, and in that case, he could only pinch his nose and recognize the fact that Renly became king. As you wish. Renly seemed to be kind. The Red God did not show a miracle, but Renly's messenger brought back Stannis' reply, and the two sides agreed to meet on the beach in the fierce sea breeze, a red heart that surrounds the flames. The deer head stands upright. After Stannis converted to the Red God's faith, he established a new family emblem, and led his men and horses with Renly's team. Meeting under the banner of Wengwan Beodir, Leonor found that Stannis had not seen for many years and had mostly bald hair, only retaining part of the edge of the mane, as if he was a kitten on the mural of his previous life, but he didn't know if he had become stronger. Leonor looked at Stannis for a while and turned his eyes to the rest of his team, except for Davos, who was the one he had met, all the strange nobles, except for a beautiful red-haired man wearing rubies. Woman Melisandre, the Red God, is the priestess of Rallo, the King of Light, and is also the one who killed Renly and reversed the battle situation of the Baratheon family. Our meeting is destined. Renly. Stannis wore plate armor and greeted Renly first when meeting. "My brother, why didn't I find you so devoutly before? But I understand now." Renly was also wearing beautiful glazed green armor, wearing a helmet decorated with deer antlers, and a full-minded smile on her face. While Stannis was sarcastic, his eyes turned to the red-robed priestess in the crowd, looking like a teasing look. HMPH, Stannis snorted coldly at Renly's provocation, then turned his eyes to Leonor, stayed for a few seconds before skipping, and said to Ed, who is riding on the white horse, "Mr. Ed, I think you'll be on my side." Ed originally wanted to say something to advise, but was a little ashamed of Stannis' words. "My brother, you chose a painful path." Leonor spoke out to relieve Ed's embarrassment. "There was no need to bully this honest man." "What about you, my brother?" bowed to Renly. "Don't you feel embarrassed?" Stannis couldn't help but question. His tone was filled with indignation, resenting Leonor would rather support Lan, who was smaller than him. "Lee is not willing to surrender to himself. I don't want to give up anything." "What have you got?" Leonor asked Stannis with a sigh in response to his indignation. Stannis has been taciturn since childhood and seems to support Robert with great effort, but in fact he is full of anger. He is full of jealousy towards Robert, thinking that the other party is just older than himself, so he takes over everything. And his talent can only serve as a foil for him. After finally waiting for Robert to die, everyone still supports Renly, and no one is willing to support him. His Highness Leonor, you should salute His Majesty Stannis. The red-robed woman Melisandre took over Leonor's question. "He is the prince chosen by the King of Light, born in the Smoke and Salt land," the priestess said solemnly, but it caused Renly to chuckle. "Haha, the land of smoke and salt, my brother, you are a piece of ham." Renly mocked again. "Enough." Stannis could no longer bear Renly's reckless attitude. His voice roared like thunder. "According to the law, the Iron Throne belongs to me, but no one supports you." Renly disregarded. "Look at the distance, the flags there, those who support me, my brother, surrender," Renly said as he took out a peach from under his cloak and handed it to Stannis, but he ignored it directly and pulled out his horse and left with his team and the flag of the Red Heart Deer Head. "You saw it." "He refused me." Renly sent Taoist to her mouth and chewed her, showing "I don't want to do this" expression at Leonor and Ed. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.